My family insists that I hand over the house I bought on my own to my pregnant sister because she needs it more. I saved for 8 years, working 2 jobs and living in a studio apartment the size of a walk-in closet. My credit score is perfect. My down payment came from overtime checks and skipped vacations. But none of that matters to my parents. Brenna's carrying twins, Mom said over Sunday dinner, as if that explained everything. She needs space. You're single. You don't need 3 bedrooms. What she didn't mention was that Brenna and her husband Tyler are both employed, making nearly double my salary combined. They've been renting a perfectly nice condo for the past 2 years. They just don't want to save like I did. I'm not giving her my house, I said flatly. Dad's fork clattered against his plate. We raised you better than to be selfish. Family comes first. Selfish. That word has followed me my entire life. When I wouldn't lend Brenna money for her wedding after she'd already blown through her budget. When I refused to co-sign Tyler's truck loan. When I took the promotion that required relocating instead of staying close to help with their first pregnancy scare that turned out to be nothing. The pressure campaign started immediately. Group texts, voicemails, my aunt showing up at my office with pamphlets about the importance of family bonds. They made it sound like I was hoarding wealth instead of simply keeping what I'd earned through years of sacrifice while Brenna took European vacations and bought designer furniture. Just think about it, Mom pleaded during her 3rd call that week. You could move back into an apartment. Brenna needs to nest. I blocked everyone for a week to think clearly. During that time, I found something interesting while reviewing paperwork from when Dad had co-signed my first student loan. He'd forged my signature on a credit card application when I was 19. The charges totaled $6,400, mostly at golf courses and restaurants. He'd been making minimum payments from my account for 3 years before I discovered it and paid it off myself. I'd never confronted him, just quietly handled it and moved on. The family peace was worth more than the fight, or so I thought. When I finally agreed to meet them for coffee, I brought documents. Every text message, every guilt trip, every instance where they'd chosen Brenna over the past decade. I also brought my lawyer. I'm not giving Brenna the house, I announced, but I am suing Dad for identity theft and fraud related to the credit card incident. Mom went pale. Brenna started crying. Dad said I was being dramatic. You can drop the house demands or I file Monday morning, I said calmly. The statute of limitations hasn't run out. I have bank statements, credit reports, and the forged signature. The coffee shop went silent. That's when Brenna said something that changed everything. You always do this. You hold grudges. You know what? I'm glad you're alone. I'm glad you'll never have what I have. She stood up, hand on her belly. Tyler and I were actually going to ask you to be the twins' godmother, but you've shown your true colors. She grabbed her purse and stormed out. I should have felt guilty. Instead, I felt something crack open inside me. A realization that maybe I'd been protecting the wrong people my entire life. My lawyer leaned forward. There's something else you should know about your family's finances. Something involving your grandmother's estate. I couldn't fit what happens next in this short video. Watch the rest down below. My grandmother died when I was 23. I was living across the country at the time, working my first real job after college. I flew home for the funeral, stayed 3 days, then flew back. The whole thing felt rushed and distant. Grandma had always been kind to me, slipping me $20 bills when my parents weren't looking, telling me I was smart enough to do anything I wanted. At the funeral, Dad mentioned something about Grandma leaving everything to be split equally between him and his sister, my Aunt Patricia. I didn't think much about it. I was grieving and exhausted. Your grandmother left a will, my lawyer said now, pulling out a manila folder. The original will, dated 2019, 4 months before her death. I stared at the folder. I don't understand. What does this have to do with anything? Your father presented a different will to probate court, she continued. One dated 2 weeks before her death, supposedly replacing the original. That second will left everything to your father, cutting out your aunt entirely. My mouth went dry. Aunt Patricia got nothing? Nothing. Your father claimed your grandmother had changed her mind because your aunt had become estranged from the family. But I did some digging after you mentioned the credit card fraud. It made me curious about other potential financial irregularities. She slid the folder across the table. Inside was a photocopy of Grandma's original will. My hands shook as I read it. The estate was supposed to be divided 4 ways, 25% to Dad, 25% to Aunt Patricia, 25% to me, 25% to Brenna. I was supposed to inherit a quarter of her estate, approximately $340,000, my lawyer said quietly. Your sister was supposed to receive the same. Your father submitted a forged will that gave him everything, then presumably distributed funds to your sister without telling you. The coffee shop tilted. I gripped the table edge. Mom was staring at the document, her face ashen. She hadn't known. I could see it in her eyes. She'd married a man who'd robbed his own children. That's insane, Dad said, but his voice cracked. That's not— Mom changed her will. She told me she wanted me to handle everything. Then you won't mind if we compare signatures with known samples, my lawyer said pleasantly. Or if we request a handwriting analysis. The probate court would be very interested to know if the second will was fraudulent. Dad stood up so fast his chair tipped backward. This is blackmail. This is justice, I said, finding my voice. You stole from me. You stole from Aunt Patricia. You probably gave Brenna her share to keep her quiet, or maybe she doesn't even know. But you took mine and pretended it never existed. We needed that money, Mom said suddenly. Everyone turned to stare at her. She looked at Dad with something between betrayal and desperation. Tell her. Tell her why. Dad's jaw worked. He sat back down heavily. Your father's business was failing, Mom said, her voice hollow. We were about to lose everything. The house, the cars, our retirement. When your grandmother died, it felt like a lifeline. So you committed fraud, I said flatly. We were going to tell you eventually, Dad said. We were going to give you your share once we got back on our feet. It's been 7 years. These things take time. Stop. Just stop. I stood up, gathering my documents. You had 7 years to make this right. Instead, you spent that time demanding I give Brenna my house. The house I bought with money I earned while you were living off what you stole from me. Where are you going? Mom asked desperately. To file multiple lawsuits. Identity theft, fraud, elder abuse for what you did to Grandma, whatever charges the prosecutor wants to bring for the forged will. I looked at Dad. You're going to prison, and I'm getting every penny back. I walked out of that coffee shop and didn't look back. The next morning, I called Aunt Patricia for the first time in 7 years. We'd lost touch after Grandma's funeral. Dad had told me she was angry and difficult, that she'd caused problems during the estate settlement. Another lie. Hello? Her voice was cautious. Aunt Patricia, this is your niece. We need to talk about Grandma's will. There was a long pause. I've been waiting for this call for 7 years. Turned out, Aunt Patricia had suspected the will was forged from the beginning. The signature looked wrong. The timing was suspicious, and it didn't match anything Grandma had told her about her final wishes. But she didn't have the money to fight Dad in court. She'd been working as a teacher, recently divorced, struggling to stay afloat. Dad knew she couldn't afford a legal battle. He counted on me being too poor to fight back, Aunt Patricia said bitterly. And he was right. Not anymore, I told her. I have a lawyer. We have evidence. And we're taking him down. We met 2 days later at my new house, the one my family wanted me to give away. Aunt Patricia walked through it slowly, touching the granite countertops, admiring the built-in bookshelves. You did this on your own, she said softly. No help from anyone. I didn't know I was supposed to get help. Dad never mentioned the inheritance. She turned to look at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. Your grandmother loved you so much. She told me she was leaving you that money specifically for a house. She wanted you to have something that was truly yours, something your parents couldn't control or influence. She knew what they were like. The words hit me like a physical blow. Grandma had seen it. She tried to protect me even after death, and Dad had stolen that protection away. We're getting it back, I said. All of it. The lawsuits took 8 months to wind their way through the courts. During that time, my family fell apart in spectacular fashion. Mom filed for divorce after discovering Dad had also been siphoning money from their joint accounts to pay off gambling debts. The credit card fraud from when I was 19 wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern. He'd been stealing from everyone around him for years. Brenna called me crying 3 weeks after the coffee shop confrontation. Tyler had found out about the inheritance money and the potential fraud charges. He'd consulted his own lawyer, worried about being implicated in any financial crimes. His lawyer told him to distance himself immediately. Tyler's leaving me, Brenna sobbed. He says he can't be married to someone whose family is under criminal investigation. It'll ruin his career. I felt nothing. No sympathy. No satisfaction. Just emptiness. I didn't know, Brenna insisted. About the will. About any of it. Dad just gave me $80,000 5 years ago. Said it was an early inheritance, that Grandma wanted me to have it. I used it for the wedding and the down payment on our condo. You got your share, I said quietly. I got nothing. I didn't know you were supposed to get anything, she whispered. I swear. I thought it was just extra because I was getting married. I thought, God, I'm so sorry. You told me you were glad I was alone. You said I'd never have what you have. Silence on the other end of the line. I was angry, she finally said. You were threatening Dad. I didn't understand. You weren't supposed to understand. You were supposed to trust me. We're sisters. Can you forgive me? I thought about the 8 years I'd spent working 2 jobs. The studio apartment where I couldn't fully extend my arms. The nights I'd eaten ramen so I could put another $200 toward my down payment. All while Brenna and Tyler had taken weekend trips to Napa and renovated their condo with money that was supposed to be mine. No, I said. I don't think I can. I hung up. The criminal case against Dad moved faster than the civil suits. The prosecutor was a middle-aged woman whose own mother had been the victim of elder financial abuse. She went after Dad with everything she had. Forging a will, elder exploitation, identity theft for the credit card, fraud. The charges stacked up like dominoes. Dad's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal. No prison time, just probation and restitution. The prosecutor laughed in his face. Your client defrauded his own dying mother and stole from his children, she said during the hearing I attended. There's a special place in hell for people like him. But first there's a place in Rikers. Dad got 6 years. Mom, who'd genuinely been unaware of the extent of his crimes, got nothing. She'd been another victim, another person Dad had manipulated and lied to. The civil suit took longer. Dad had already spent most of the inheritance money. The business had failed anyway, despite his fraudulent infusion of cash. The house was mortgaged to the hilt. There was almost nothing left to recover, except Brenna's condo. My lawyer explained it carefully. The down payment came from stolen funds. Legally, we can force a sale to recover those assets. I looked at Aunt Patricia. She looked at me. I don't want to make my sister homeless, I said slowly. Even after everything, even though she's been living in a home partially paid for with your money? I thought about Brenna's words at the coffee shop, her cruelty, the way she'd thrown the godmother offer in my face like a weapon. I also thought about the sister who'd taught me to ride a bike when I was 6, who'd let me sleep in her room during thunderstorm, who'd existed before Tyler, before the entitlement, before she'd learned to be my parents' favorite by being whatever they wanted. Give her 6 months, I said. 6 months to refinance or sell on her own terms. If she can buy out the fraudulent portion of her down payment, she can keep the condo. If not, we force the sale. Aunt Patricia squeezed my hand. You're a better person than I am. No, I said. I just don't want to become what he was. Brenna couldn't refinance. Tyler had already left, taking his income with him. She was 7 months pregnant with twins and couldn't work enough hours to qualify for a loan that would cover the buyout. The condo sold in 4 weeks. After paying off the mortgage, there was $160,000 left. I got $80,000. Aunt Patricia got $80,000. It wasn't the full $340,000 we'd each been owed, but it was something. Brenna moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment in a worse neighborhood. She called me once after the move, her voice small and defeated. I had to sell all the designer furniture, she said. Everything from the condo, it didn't fit. and I needed the money. The twins will be here in 6 weeks, and I don't have anything. No crib, no changing table, nothing. I waited for the guilt to come, the family obligation. The voice of my parents telling me blood was thicker than water, that sisters had to stick together. It didn't come. You should call some charities, I said. There are organizations that help single mothers. I'm not a single mother. Tyler and I are just... He filed for divorce, Brenna. You are a single mother. She was crying now. This isn't how it was supposed to be. I was supposed to have the perfect family, the perfect house. You were supposed to be the sad single one who never got it together. There it was. The truth she'd been too polite to say before. Goodbye, Brenna. I blocked her number after that. The $80,000 from the condo sale went straight into my savings account. Combined with my own savings, I finally had the emergency fund I'd been dreaming of for years. 6 months of expenses, security, freedom. I could finally breathe. Aunt Patricia and I started meeting for dinner once a month. She told me stories about Grandma that I'd never heard. About how Grandma had worked 3 jobs to put Dad through college, how she'd sacrificed everything for her children, how she'd been disappointed when Dad had turned out the way he did. She never said it directly, Aunt Patricia explained, but I could see it in her eyes when he'd show up asking for money. She knew he'd never pay it back. Why did she leave him anything at all? Because he was her son. She loved him even though he'd disappointed her. That's what parents do. Love you even when you don't deserve it. I thought about my own parents, the way they'd pressured me, the way they'd always chosen Brenna, the way they'd stolen from me and then demanded more. Not all parents, I said quietly. Aunt Patricia raised her wine glass. No, not all parents. 6 months after Dad went to prison, I got a letter from him. It had been forwarded through my lawyer, since I'd blocked all other contact. The letter was 7 pages long, single space, dense with justifications and excuses. He explained about the business failing, about the pressure he'd felt to provide for his family, about the gambling addiction he'd hidden for years. He'd meant to pay me back. He'd always meant to make it right. He just needed time. If I'd been patient, if I hadn't involved lawyers, everything could have been worked out. It was my fault, really, that it had come to this. The last line made my hands shake. I hope someday you'll forgive me and we can be a real family again. Love, Dad. I read the letter 3 times. Each time I felt the old hooks trying to catch. The guilt, the obligation, the little girl who just wanted her father's approval. Then I tore it into small pieces and threw it away. I didn't owe him forgiveness. I didn't owe him anything. 2 years passed. I got promoted to senior analyst at my company. The raise was substantial. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't constantly worried about money. I could buy groceries without checking my bank balance first. I could replace my worn-out work shoes without budgeting for 2 months. It felt surreal. I started dating someone I'd met at a work conference. His name was Desmond, and he was kind and stable, and had no interest in using me for money or connections. On our 4th date, I told him about my family, about the lawsuits and the fraud and the estrangement. That sounds lonely, he said simply. No judgment, no pressure to reconcile, just acknowledgement. It is, I admitted. Sometimes I miss having a family, even a terrible one. There's this empty space where they used to be. So, fill it with something better. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter, teaching financial literacy classes, how to build credit, how to save, how to spot financial abuse before it trapped you. The women who came to my classes had escaped situations worse than mine. Domestic violence, economic coercion, partners who'd controlled every penny and left them with nothing. They thanked me with tears in their eyes, clutching the handouts I'd prepared about opening secret bank accounts and hiding emergency cash. I understood them in a way I never had before. One evening, a young woman approached me after class. She couldn't have been older than 22. My family wants me to give them my paycheck every month, she said. They say it's my duty since I'm living in their house rent-free, but I can't ever save. I can't ever leave. I saw myself at 19, watching Dad make minimum payments on the credit card he'd opened in my name. Here's what you do, I told her, and proceeded to outline a step-by-step plan for secret savings, for setting boundaries, for getting out. 3 months later, she sent me a photo. She was standing in front of a small apartment, her own keys in her hand, grinning widely. That photo went on my refrigerator. A reminder that sometimes the best family isn't the one you're born into. It's the one you build yourself. I'd been estranged from my parents and sister for 3 years when Mom called. It was late evening, and I almost didn't answer. The number had changed since I'd blocked it, but I recognized the area code. Hello? Please don't hang up. Mom's voice was desperate. I need to talk to you. I should have ended the call. Instead, I waited. Your father's being released early, she said. Good behavior. He'll be out in 2 weeks. Congratulations. He wants to see you. He wants to apologize properly, face to face. He's been going to therapy in prison. He's changed. I laughed. Actually laughed. No, please. He's your father. He made mistakes, but he's learned from them. Family is supposed to forgive. Is that what you did? You forgave him for stealing from you? From me? From everyone? I'm still your mother. You stood by and watched him demand I give my house to Brenna. You didn't question it. You didn't defend me. You just went along with whatever he wanted. I didn't know about the will then, but you knew about the credit card fraud. You knew he'd forged my signature and stolen from me when I was 19. I mentioned it at the coffee shop and you barely blinked. You'd known all along, hadn't you? Silence. Hadn't you? We were trying to protect you, she whispered, from the burden of knowing what he was capable of. You mean you were trying to protect him, to keep me from filing charges, to maintain the illusion of a normal family while he destroyed me from the inside. That's not fair. I don't care about fair. I care about truth. And the truth is that you chose him over me, every single time. He's sick. The gambling addiction, the lying. It's a disease, and I'm done being infected by it. I felt surprisingly calm. Don't call this number again. If Dad wants to apologize, he can write a letter. I probably won't read it, but at least it won't interrupt my evening. I hung up. Desmond looked up from his book. Your mom? Yeah. How do you feel? I thought about it. Tired, but okay. He nodded and went back to reading. He didn't need to make a big deal out of it. He understood that sometimes the right thing to do was simply witness and accept. That's what love looked like, I realized. Not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, just quiet understanding, just showing up, just believing someone when they said they were okay or not okay, and responding accordingly. Dad got released 3 weeks later. I found out because Aunt Patricia called to warn me. He's been asking around about where you live, she said. He knows what city you're in. I think he might try to show up. Let him try. I'd already changed the locks and installed a security system. My neighborhood had a gate code. I'll call the police if he shows up. He thinks you owe him a chance. I owe him nothing. 2 days later, I came home from work to find Dad sitting on the curb outside my gate. He looked older, grayer. Prison had carved lines into his face that hadn't been there before. I parked my car inside the gate and walked over to the intercom. You need to leave. I just want to talk. His voice was raspy. 5 minutes. No, I'm your father. You're a felon who committed fraud and identity theft against. That's what you are now. The father part ended when you forged Grandma's will. I made mistakes. I was desperate, but I paid for them. I did my time. You did part of your time. You still owe me 3 years of sleep I lost, 8 years of struggle I endured, and an entire inheritance you stole. You'll never pay enough time for that. He stood up, gripping the gate bars. I'm still your father. That has to mean something. It means I know exactly how little I can trust you. It means I know that given the choice between doing the right thing and taking the easy way out, you'll always choose yourself. It means I've spent 3 years building a life without you, and it's been the best 3 years of my adult life. His face crumpled. Please. I've changed. I'm in therapy. I'm going to AA meetings. I'm trying to be better. Good. Be better for yourself. Be better for Mom if she's stupid enough to take you back. But don't ask me to be the test case for your redemption story. I'm not a character in your narrative about overcoming adversity. I'm the person you victimized. You can't hold a grudge forever. Watch me. I walked back to my car, drove through the gate, and closed it behind me. In my rearview mirror, I could see him still standing there, shoulders slumped, looking lost. I felt nothing. That evening, I blocked his new number. Then I called my lawyer to get a restraining order drafted, just in case. You're really done with them, Desmond observed. It wasn't a question. I'm really done. He kissed my forehead. Good. 4 years after the coffee shop confrontation, Brenna reached out through a mutual friend. She'd been sober for 18 months and was working through her steps. She wanted to make amends. The mutual friend Callie called me first. I know you're not in contact with your sister, but she's really trying to get her life together. The twins are in preschool now. She's working full-time. She's taking accountability. That's great for her. She wants to apologize to you, properly. She can write a letter. She'd prefer to do it in person. I'm sure she would, but I don't owe her my presence. If she wants to apologize, she can write it down. If it's genuine, I'll know. The letter arrived 2 weeks later. It was 4 pages long, handwritten. No justifications, no excuses. Just a straightforward accounting of how she'd treated me, how she'd been entitled and cruel, how she'd benefited from stolen money while I'd struggled. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just said she was sorry and that she understood if I never wanted to speak to her again. She hoped I was happy. She hoped I'd found peace. The twins were named Oliver and Sophie. They loved dinosaurs and painting. Tyler sent child support but had remarried and started a new family. He saw them twice a month. She was dating someone new, a man named Grant who knew about her past and didn't judge her for it. They were taking things slow. She'd gotten her real estate license and was doing well. She'd saved enough to put a down payment on a small house in a decent school district. She was building something for herself and her children. No one else's money. No one else's help. I think about you sometimes, she wrote at the end. I wonder if you ever think about me, if you ever miss having a sister. I miss having you, but I understand why you're gone. I drove you away. I chose wrong, over and over. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, and I'm sorry. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in a box in my closet, with all the other artifacts of my old life. I didn't respond. A month later, I got an invitation to Aunt Patricia's wedding. She was marrying her longtime girlfriend, Diane, who I'd met several times at our monthly dinners. The ceremony would be small, just close friends and family. Family. The word didn't hurt anymore. I went to the wedding with Desmond. Aunt Patricia cried when she saw me. We danced together, her in her elegant navy suit, me in a green dress I'd bought without checking the price tag first. I'm so glad you're here, she said. You're the only blood family I have left that I actually want to know. What about Dad? He sent a card. I threw it away. She smiled. Some bridges are meant to burn. What about Brenna? I invited her. She declined. Said she didn't think you'd want her there. She was right. Aunt Patricia squeezed my hand. You don't have to forgive her, you know. Not ever. Not even if she spends the rest of her life making amends. You get to decide what's best for you. I know. And you're okay with your decision? I watched Diane laughing with her friends. Watched Desmond chatting easily with the caterer about food allergies. Watched this chosen family celebrate love in all its messy, imperfect glory. I'm more than okay, I said. 5 years after the coffee shop. I'd been with Desmond for 3 of those years. We'd moved in together, adopted a dog, and built a life that felt steady and real. I'd been promoted again. Aunt Patricia and Diane had become regular fixtures in our lives, coming over for Sunday dinners where we cooked elaborate meals and talked about everything and nothing. I rarely thought about my parents or Brenna anymore. They'd become historical figures, people I used to know, characters in a story about someone else's life. Then I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You should know." Inside was a single line. "Your father is dying. Pancreatic cancer. Weeks, maybe days. He's asking for you." The email was signed by someone named Evelyn, who identified herself as Dad's hospice social worker. I stared at the email for a long time. Desmond came into my office. "You okay? You've been quiet." I showed him the email. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I don't know. That was the truth. I'd imagined this moment before, thought about what I'd feel when one of my parents eventually died. I'd expected rage or satisfaction, or at least some sense of closure. Instead, I felt numb, distant, like I was reading about a stranger's life. Do you want to go see him? Desmond pressed gently. I don't think so. Are you sure? I don't owe him a deathbed reconciliation. I don't owe him the comfort of my forgiveness so he can die feeling like he made things right. He didn't make things right. He just ran out of time. Okay. That's it? Just okay? Desmond shrugged. It's your decision. I'll support whatever you choose. If you want to go, I'll drive you. If you want to stay home, I'll make dinner and we'll watch that documentary about the cheese caves. I laughed despite myself. The cheese caves? You said you wanted to see it. I leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. This was family. Not blood, not obligation, but choice. Every single day, choosing each other. Let's watch the cheese documentary, I said. I never responded to Evelyn's email. Dad died 6 days later. I found out through Aunt Patricia, who'd heard from a distant cousin. There's a funeral on Thursday, she told me. Your mom planned it. Small service at the church. Are you going? I wasn't invited. Neither were you, apparently. I felt a flicker of something. Not pain, maybe relief. Mom had made the decision for me. I was officially not family anymore. That's fine, I said. Is it? Yeah, it actually is. 3 weeks after the funeral, an attorney contacted me. Dad's estate was being settled. There were debts mostly. Medical bills from the cancer treatment, outstanding credit card balances, a small life insurance policy that went to Mom, but there was also a letter marked to be delivered to me upon his death. Do you want to receive it? The attorney asked. You're not obligated. Given the family situation, I understand if you'd prefer not to. What does it say? I haven't read it. Attorney-client privilege, but it's short. Half a page, maybe. I thought about it. The last letter had been full of justifications and blame. 7 pages of excuses for why he destroyed our family. Send it, I said. But send it to my lawyer, not directly to me. The letter arrived 2 days later, forwarded through my lawyer with a note. Read this when you're ready. Or don't. Your choice. I kept the sealed envelope on my desk for a week. Every time I walked past it, I felt a weight in my chest. Curiosity mixed with dread. Finally, Desmond sat down next to me. Want me to read it first? Or throw it away? Or burn it dramatically in the fireplace? We don't have a fireplace. We could get one. I've been thinking about remodeling. I picked up the envelope. If I read this and it's terrible, will you still love me if I become a mess for a while? I'll love you if you become a mess forever. I opened the envelope. The letter was written in shaky handwriting, clearly done in the last days of his life. It said, You were right. I stole from you. I lied to you. I chose myself over you. Every single time. I can't fix it now. There's no time left. No money left. Nothing I can give you except this. You were right to walk away. You were right to protect yourself. I hope you've built a good life without me. You deserved better than what I gave you. I'm sorry I couldn't be that. Dad, I read it twice. Then I handed it to Desmond. Huh, he said after reading it. That's almost a real apology. Almost. How do you feel? I thought about it carefully, tested my emotions like prodding a sore tooth. Sad. Not for me, for him. He spent his whole life making terrible choices, and in the end, all he could do was admit it. But admitting it didn't change anything, didn't give me back those years, didn't undo the damage. Are you going to forgive him? No, but I'm not going to carry him anymore either. He's gone. I can finally put the whole thing down. I folded the letter and put it in the box with Brenna's apology letter, Grandma's original will, and all the court documents from the lawsuits. Then I put the box in the back of my closet, behind winter coats and old shoes. Out of sight. Not forgotten, but not front and center anymore. Just part of my history. Not my present, not my future. 6 months after Dad died, I ran into Brenna at a grocery store. It was completely random. I was buying cheese for a dinner party. She was in the pasta aisle with 2 small children who looked exactly like her. We froze when we saw each other. Hi, she said cautiously. Hi. The twins, they had to be the twins, they looked about 5 now, stared at me with open curiosity. Who's that? One of them asked. Brenna's face flushed. This is my sister. You have a sister? Yes, we don't see each other very often. I should have walked away. Instead, I crouched down to their level. Hi, I'm your aunt. Their eyes got wide. We have an aunt? Apparently. Do you have kids? The other twin asked. No, just a dog. His name is Ranger. We want a dog, they said in unison. Brenna looked exhausted. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She wore workout clothes that had seen better days. No makeup, no designer bags, just a tired single mom doing her grocery shopping. They look like you, I said, standing back up. Everyone says that. She paused. They ask about you sometimes. When they see other kids with aunts and uncles, I tell them you live far away. That's not inaccurate. Emotionally, I mean, also not inaccurate. We stood there awkwardly, while the twins examined boxes of pasta shaped like dinosaurs. I got your letter, I said finally. The one from your 12-step program. I didn't expect a response. I know. That's part of why I'm telling you this. It was a good letter. You didn't make excuses. You didn't ask for anything. That mattered. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you. I'm not saying I forgive you, or that I want to have a relationship. I'm just saying the letter mattered. It showed me you've actually changed, or you're trying to. That counts for something. Can I ask, are you happy? Very. Good. She wiped her eyes quickly. That's good. You deserve it. The twins started arguing about which pasta shape was scientifically superior. Brenna moved to intervene. Before you go, I said. Are you okay? Financially, I mean? Are the kids okay? She looked surprised. We're okay. Not great, but okay. Grant, my partner, he's good to us. He's not rich, but he's steady. We manage. If you ever need help, serious help, emergency help, Aunt Patricia has my number. I couldn't ask you. I'm not offering to fund your lifestyle. I'm offering to make sure your children have food and heat and safety. There's a difference. She nodded, crying openly now. Thank you. Don't make me regret it. I walked away before she could respond, before I could change my mind, before the old guilt could hook me and drag me back into the dysfunction. In the parking lot, I called Desmond. I just saw Brenna. How was it? Weird? Sad? Okay, I think. Do you want to talk about it? I want to go home, play with Ranger, and eat all the fancy cheese we bought. That sounds perfect. It was perfect. The rest of the evening, the rest of my life, all of it stretching out ahead of me without the weight of my family's expectations crushing down. 7 years after the coffee shop confrontation, Aunt Patricia called with news. Mom had died. Heart attack. Quick and unexpected. The funeral is next week, she said. Your mother's sister is organizing it, not your father's family. What's left of them anyway? Are you going? I thought about Mom. The way she'd stood by while Dad demanded I give away my house. The way she'd known about the credit card fraud and never said anything. The way she'd chosen him over and over until there was nothing left to choose. But I also thought about the small moments. Her teaching me to braid my hair. Her proud smile at my college graduation. The way she'd cried when I moved away from my first job. Not because she was sad, but because she was worried I wouldn't be able to handle being alone. She'd loved me, in her way. It just hadn't been enough. I'll go, I said. The funeral was small, maybe 20 people. Mostly Mom's side of the family that I barely knew. Brenna was there with Grant and the twins. She gave me a small wave from across the room. I nodded back. We didn't sit together, didn't speak beyond a brief acknowledgement. But we were both there, orbiting the same grief from different distances. During the service, people spoke about Mom's kindness, her volunteer work at the church, her skill at quilting. They talked about her like she was a saint. No one mentioned Dad or the fraud or how she'd enabled his worst behaviors. When it was over, I stood by her grave for a few minutes, alone. I'm sorry you spent your life loving someone who didn't deserve it, I said quietly. I'm sorry you never found the strength to leave. I'm sorry you chose him over me. I put a single flower on the casket. Then I walked away. Brenna caught up with me in the parking lot. Wait. I turned. I wanted you to know, Mom talked about you at the end. When she knew she was sick, she'd been having heart problems for months. She asked me to tell you something. What? She said she was proud of you, for leaving, for building your own life. She said she'd never been that brave. I felt tears prick my eyes. She told you that? In the hospital the day before she died. She made me promise to tell you if I ever saw you again. Brenna's voice cracked. She also said she was sorry, for not protecting you, for not being stronger. Did she say anything about Dad? About what he did? She said she knew. She'd always known. She just didn't know how to stop loving him, even when he was destroying everything. I nodded. That sounded like Mom, trapped by her own heart. Thank you for telling me, I said. Thank you for coming. It would have meant something to her. We stood there in the parking lot, two sisters who barely knew each other anymore, sharing a moment of genuine connection for the first time in 7 years. Your kids are beautiful, I said finally. They're a handful, she smiled. But they're mine. I did that. I built that. Good for you. Good for you too. Aunt Patricia says you're doing really well, that you're happy. I am. I'm glad. Really glad. I got in my car. Brenna got in hers. We drove in different directions, back to our separate lives. I never saw her again. 8 years after the coffee shop, Desmond and I got married. It was a small ceremony in our backyard with 30 people we actually loved. Aunt Patricia officiated. Diane cried through the whole thing. My friends from work came. My volunteers from the women's shelter came. One of them brought her 3-year-old daughter, the child she'd had after leaving an abusive situation with my help. No one from my original family was there. I didn't miss them. During the reception, Aunt Patricia pulled me aside. I've been thinking about your grandmother a lot today. She would have loved this. Loved seeing you this happy. I wish she'd been here. She is here. In the life you've built. In the person you've become. She wanted you to have freedom and security and love. You have all three. She squeezed my hand. You won. I looked around at the people laughing and eating and celebrating with us. At Desmond talking animatedly with Diane about something ridiculous. At the simple joy of being surrounded by people who genuinely cared. Yeah, I said. I did. 9 years later, I was promoted to director. The salary was life-changing. For the first time, I could save aggressively while still living comfortably. Desmond and I talked about buying a bigger house, maybe starting a family. I want kids, he said one night. But only if you do. Only if you're ready. I thought about my childhood, the dysfunction, the manipulation, the way I'd been taught that love meant sacrifice, and sacrifice meant suffering. I want to be a different kind of parent, I said. I want to be the kind who shows up, who keeps promises, who chooses their kids first. You will be. How do you know? Because you've already broken the cycle. You've already chosen different. Having kids is just the next step. We started trying 6 months later. It took a while, fertility issues on my side. But eventually, I got pregnant. During my pregnancy, I thought about calling Brenna, thought about reaching out, letting her know she was going to be an aunt, asking for advice about twins since she'd been through it. I never made the call. Some bridges were meant to stay burned. Our daughter was born on a Wednesday morning in April. We named her Margaret, after my grandmother. Maggie for short. She had Desmond's eyes and my stubborn chin. She was perfect. Aunt Patricia and Diane came to visit in the hospital. They brought flowers and balloons and tears of joy. Your grandmother would have loved her, Aunt Patricia whispered, holding Maggie carefully. I know. Are you going to tell Brenna? No. What about when Maggie asks about cousins, about extended family? I looked at my daughter, sleeping peacefully in Aunt Patricia's arms. I'll tell her the truth, that sometimes family hurts you, and when that happens, you have to choose yourself. I'll tell her about Grandma, and how she tried to protect me even after death. I'll tell her about you and Diane, about chosen family, about how love is a verb, not a noun. That's a lot of complicated truth for a baby. She'll grow into it. Maggie did grow into it. By the time she was 5, she understood that some people had big extended families with lots of cousins and grandparents, and some people had smaller families that were just as complete. Do I have cousins? She asked once. Technically, yes. But we don't see them. Why? Because their mom and I had a disagreement a long time ago, and we decided it was healthier to stay apart. Was she mean to you? Sometimes. Then I don't want to meet her. I smiled. Maybe someday, when you're older, you can decide for yourself. But for now, it's okay to just have the family we have. She seemed satisfied with that answer. Maggie grew up surrounded by love. Real love. The kind that showed up consistently. Aunt Patricia and Diane taught her to garden. Desmond taught her to cook. I taught her about money, about saving, about protecting yourself from people who would take advantage. She never met my parents. Never met Brenna. Never experienced the dysfunction that had shaped my early life. Sometimes I wondered if I should have done more to keep those connections alive. If I was depriving Maggie of something important. Then I'd remember the coffee shop, the years of manipulation, the stolen inheritance, the way they demanded I give up my own home without a second thought. No, Maggie didn't need that. She needed exactly what she had. Parents who showed up, who kept promises, who chose her first. 10 years after the coffee shop, I was invited to speak at a conference about financial abuse and recovery. I almost didn't go. Public speaking terrified me. But the organizer was persistent, and eventually I agreed. I told my story to 300 people. About the credit card fraud. About the forged will. About the pressure campaign to give away my house. About walking away and rebuilding. Afterward, dozens of people came up to me. They shared their own stories. Parents who'd stolen their identity. Siblings who'd demanded money. Partners who'd controlled every penny. How did you do it? One woman asked, crying. How did you actually walk away? I decided I mattered more than their comfort, I said. I decided my peace was worth more than their approval. And then I just did it. One day at a time. One boundary at a time. I'm scared I'll regret it. You might, but you'll regret staying more. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Thank you. I drove home that night feeling lighter than I had in years. My story had meant something. My pain had been transformed into something useful, something that could help others. That's what healing looked like. Not forgetting, not necessarily forgiving, but transforming, making something beautiful out of something broken. 11 years after the coffee shop, I got a message from an unknown number. It was Brenna. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but Oliver was asking about you. He remembered meeting you in the grocery store years ago. He asked why he doesn't have an aunt when his friends do. I didn't know what to say. Would it be okay if I told him the truth? That we're sisters, but we don't see each other because I hurt you? I want him to understand that actions have consequences, even with family, maybe especially with family. I stared at the message for a long time. Finally, I wrote back. You can tell him whatever you think is appropriate. I'm not going to control your narrative, but yes, telling him that actions have consequences is a good lesson. I hope he learns it earlier than we did. She responded immediately. Thank you, that's fair. I hope you're well. I hope you're happy. I didn't respond to that. I'd said what needed to be said. The conversation ended there. 3 days later, she sent one more message. Oliver wanted you to have this. Attached was a child's drawing. It showed 2 stick figures labeled Aunt and me. They were holding hands. Above them, in careful kindergarten letters, it said, I wish I could meet you. I saved the drawing to my phone. I didn't respond, but I saved it. 12 years after the coffee shop, Aunt Patricia died. Heart failure. She was 71. I was devastated. She'd been my anchor, my proof that family could be healthy and supportive and good. Losing her felt like losing the foundation I'd built my life on. At her funeral, Diane read a letter Aunt Patricia had written before she died. It was addressed to me. My dear girl, it began. If you're hearing this, then I've moved on to whatever comes next. Don't be too sad. I've lived a full life, loved deeply, and died knowing I was loved in return. That's all anyone can ask for. I want you to know how proud I am of you. When your father stole from you, you could have become bitter and broken. Instead, you became strong and principled. You built a life based on your values, not on obligation or guilt. You chose yourself when no one else would. That takes extraordinary courage. I also want you to know that your grandmother saw this in you. She knew you'd be okay. That's why she left you that money. Not because she thought you needed it, but because she wanted you to have the security to walk away if you had to. She wanted you to have freedom. You used her gift exactly as she hoped you would. You chose freedom. You chose yourself. You built a family based on love, not biology. Keep doing that. Keep choosing the people who choose you. Keep building the life you deserve. And when you doubt yourself, because you will, everyone does, remember that you have already survived the worst they could do to you. You came out the other side. You won. I love you, I'm proud of you, and I'll be watching over you just like your grandmother has been all along. Love, Aunt Patricia. I sobbed through the entire reading. Desmond held me while I shook. Maggie, now 7, climbed into my lap and hugged me tight. It's okay to be sad, Mama, she whispered. Aunt Patricia was special. She really was. After the funeral, Diane pulled me aside. She wanted you to have something. She handed me a small wooden box. Inside was Grandma's pearl necklace, the one she'd worn in every family photo. There was a note attached. These belong to your grandmother. They should have come to you years ago. Now they're finally home. Patricia. I held the pearls carefully, feeling their weight, feeling the connection to the women who'd come before me, who'd tried to protect me, who'd loved me even when it cost them. Thank you, I whispered to the air, to wherever Aunt Patricia was now, for everything. 13 years after the coffee shop, I published a book about financial abuse and recovery. It became a bestseller, not because I was a particularly skilled writer, but because the story resonated. Thousands of people had experienced what I had. They needed to know they weren't alone. I did book tours, gave interviews, spoke at conferences. Everywhere I went, people thanked me for putting their experience into words. One woman approached me after an event in Seattle. My mother wants my inheritance, she said. She says I owe it to her because she raised me, but she was abusive. She destroyed my childhood. Do I owe her anything? No, I said firmly. You don't owe your abusers anything. Not money, not time, not peace, not forgiveness. You get to protect yourself. You get to choose your own life. Even if she's dying? Especially if she's dying. Deathbed guilt is still manipulation. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. I needed to hear that. I thought about Dad's letter, his half apology, about how his death hadn't changed anything, about how I'd chosen not to give him the comfort of my forgiveness, and I'd never regretted it. You get to choose yourself, I told her again. That's not selfish. That's survival. 14 years after the coffee shop, Maggie came home from school upset. Lily's parents are getting divorced, she said. Lily says it's because her dad was mean to her mom. She says her mom is brave for leaving. That's true, I said carefully. Sometimes people have to leave relationships that hurt them, even family relationships. Like you did with your sister? Yes. Do you ever miss her? I thought about it honestly. Sometimes I miss the idea of her, the sister I wanted her to be, but I don't miss the person she actually was, the one who hurt me. What's the difference? The idea was who I hoped she'd be. The reality was who she chose to be. And I had to accept the reality, not keep wishing for the idea. Maggie nodded thoughtfully. I think I understand. She went to her room to do homework. I sat there, marveling at how I'd managed to raise a daughter who could process complex emotional concepts at 9 years old, who could understand that love wasn't always enough, that sometimes walking away was the right choice. I'd broken the cycle. She'd never have to unlearn what I'd spent decades unlearning. 15 years after the coffee shop, I got an email from Oliver, Brenna's son. He was 15 now, old enough to find me on social media and reach out on his own. Dear Aunt, he wrote, I know you and my mom don't talk. I know it's complicated. She's told me some of it, though I'm sure there's more she hasn't said. I'm not writing to ask you to reconcile or to make you feel guilty. I just wanted you to know that I think about you sometimes. I remember meeting you when I was little. You seemed nice, different from our family, calm. I wish I'd gotten to know you, but I understand why I didn't. My mom made mistakes, big ones. She spent my whole life trying to fix them. I don't know if that matters to you, but I thought you should know. I hope you're well. I hope you have a good life. Maybe someday, if you're ever willing, I can meet my cousin. Mom says I have one. A girl. Around my age, I think. It would be nice to have more family, but I understand if that's not possible. Take care. Oliver. I read the email 3 times. Then I showed it to Desmond. What do you think? I think that's a thoughtful kid who didn't do anything wrong. His mother did. He's not his mother. I thought about the sins of the father, about how I'd vowed never to punish children for their parents' mistakes, about how the cycle of dysfunction only continued if we let it. I don't know if I'm ready, I said. Then don't be ready. Tell him maybe someday. Keep the door open without walking through it yet. I wrote back to Oliver that night. Thank you for reaching out. You're right that it's complicated. Your mother and I have history that can't be easily resolved, but you didn't cause that history. You're your own person. I'm not ready for a relationship right now, but I appreciate you writing. If you want to write again in the future, I'll read it. Maybe someday, when you're older, we can meet. Until then, I wish you well. And yes, you have a cousin. Her name is Maggie. She's a good kid. Take care of yourself. Your aunt. He wrote back immediately. Thank you for responding. That's more than I expected. I'll respect your boundaries. But I'm glad you exist. I'm glad Maggie exists. It makes me feel less alone somehow. Take care. I didn't respond to that, but I saved the message. And I thought about the future, about the possibility that maybe, someday, when enough time had passed, I could build something with the next generation that I couldn't build with the previous one. Maybe. Someday. But not yet. 16 years after the coffee shop, I was standing in my kitchen making dinner when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Hello? Is this... A pause. Is this the daughter of Thomas and Margaret? My parents' names. My stomach dropped. Who is this? I am calling from the county medical examiner's office. I'm sorry to inform you that your sister, Brenna Chen, was killed in a car accident this morning. The wooden spoon fell from my hand. What? She listed you as her emergency contact. We need someone to come identify the body and make arrangements. She has minor children. Are you able to... Her children, Oliver and Sophie. Where are they? They're with their father currently. He's been notified. But there are estate matters. Personal effects. I'll come. I hung up and immediately called Desmond. He came home from work early. We drove to the hospital together, his hand steady on my knee while I shook. Brenna was 38. Too young. Way too young. They led me to the viewing room. She looked like she was sleeping. Peaceful. No signs of trauma. The accident had been quick, they said. A drunk driver. She hadn't suffered. That's her, I confirmed, my voice hollow. They handed me a bag of personal effects. Her wallet, her phone, her wedding ring. She'd remarried Grant 3 years ago, I learned later. A photo of the twins from when they were little, tucked in her wallet. I sat in the hospital waiting room and went through her phone. The passcode was still 1234, the same one she'd had in her 20s. Some things never changed. Her texts were full of messages to the twins, reminders about homework, inside jokes. Love you to the moon and back, she'd sent to Oliver that morning, an hour before the accident. Her last message to me was from 3 years ago, the drawing Oliver had sent. She'd never deleted our conversation thread, even though I'd never responded after that. I found myself crying, not for the sister I'd had, but for the sister I'd lost long before today. For the chance at reconciliation that would now never come. For Oliver and Sophie, who'd lost their mother. For the waste of it all. Desmond put his arm around me. I'm sorry. I didn't think I'd care this much. She was still your sister. You're allowed to grieve. The funeral was large. Brenna had built a life in the community. She had friends, colleagues, people who'd loved her. Grant spoke, crying openly. She spent years making amends for past mistakes, he said. She became the person she always should have been. She was a good mother, a good partner, a good friend. She was finally happy. Oliver spoke too. At 15, he was poised and articulate. My mom used to tell me that everyone deserves a second chance, that everyone can change if they want to badly enough. She proved that. She changed her whole life. She became someone I'm proud to call my mom. Sophie, 15 and tiny like her mother, whispered about how her mom had taught her to be strong, to stand up for herself, to never accept less than she deserved. I sat in the back, Maggie beside me, and wondered if I should have answered Oliver's email differently, if I should have let Brenna back in, if I'd missed something important by holding on to my anger. After the service, Oliver found me. "Thank you for coming. I'm sorry for your loss. Will you," he hesitated, "will you stay for the reception? I'd like you to meet Sophie and Grant. I think they'd want to know you." I almost said no, almost used Maggie as an excuse, said we needed to get home. But then I looked at this kid who'd just lost his mother, who was trying so hard to hold it together, and I couldn't. "We'll stay." Sophie looked exactly like Brenna. Same eyes, same stubborn chin. She stared at me with open curiosity. "You're the aunt," she said. "I'm the aunt. Mom talked about you sometimes. She said you were the bravest person she knew." "She said that?" "She said you walked away when everything was broken, and you built something better. She said that took more courage than she ever had." I felt tears burning. "Your mom was brave too. She changed her whole life. That's not easy. She wanted to apologize to you, properly. She talked about it all the time. But she didn't think you'd want to hear from her." "I wouldn't have. Not then. What about now?" "Now it doesn't matter. She's gone." Sophie nodded. "I wish things had been different. I wish we'd known you. Known Maggie." Maggie stepped forward. "I'm Maggie." The two girls stared at each other. Cousins who should have grown up together, who'd lost years because of adult dysfunction. "Do you want to be friends?" Sophie asked. Maggie looked at me. I nodded. "Yeah," Maggie said. "I'd like that." And just like that, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation with the past, but something new, something the next generation could build. Later that evening, Grant pulled me aside. "Brenna left you something. In her will. She updated it 2 years ago." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $80,000. The exact amount she'd received from the fraudulent inheritance. There was also a letter. "I know this doesn't make up for what was stolen from you. I know money doesn't fix betrayal or erase the years you struggled while I benefited from our father's theft. But this is yours. It always should have been yours. I'm sorry I didn't give it back sooner. I'm sorry I didn't do a lot of things sooner. I'm sorry we ran out of time. I hope you're happy. I hope you have everything you deserve. And I hope someday, maybe our kids can have what we didn't. A real family, even if we can't be part of it. Brenna." I held the check and the letter, feeling the weight of 16 years collapse into this moment. "She really did change," Grant said quietly. "She wasn't the person you knew anymore. She'd become someone better. I believe you. I'm sorry you never got to see it." "Me too." I took the check home, put it in a college fund for Oliver and Sophie. They'd need it more than I did. The money didn't matter anymore. It had never really been about the money. It had been about the principle, about being seen and valued, about not being treated like my needs were less important than everyone else's wants. Brenna had finally seen it. She'd finally understood. She tried to make it right. And now she was gone. 17 years after the coffee shop, Maggie started high school. She and Sophie had become close friends, texting daily, seeing each other on weekends. Oliver was in college, studying psychology, wanting to understand family dynamics, and help others navigate dysfunction. They called me aunt. Not grudgingly, not formally, but naturally. Like I'd always been part of their lives. One Sunday, Oliver came over for dinner. Afterward, he helped me with dishes while Desmond and the girls played with Ranger in the backyard. "I'm writing a paper about generational trauma," Oliver said, "about how dysfunction passes down through families, about how some people break the cycle." Sounds like a heavy topic. It's important, though. I want to understand why some families stay broken and others heal. Why you and my mom couldn't reconcile, but you and I could have a relationship. Do you resent me for not giving your mom another chance? He was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes. When she was alive, I used to wish you'd call, wish you'd show up, wish you'd forgive her so we could all be a family. But then she died. And I understood something I hadn't before." "What's that?" "That your healing mattered more than her redemption. That you weren't obligated to sacrifice your peace to make her feel better about her past. That boundaries aren't punishment, they're protection." I felt something release in my chest, some guilt I'd been carrying for 16 years. "I'm glad you understand that. I learned it from you, and from Mom actually. She used to tell us that just because someone changes doesn't mean you owe them access to your life. That forgiveness isn't the same as reconciliation. She was teaching us what she wished someone had taught her earlier. She sounds like she was a good mom." "She was. She really was." He smiled sadly. "I think she would have been a good sister too, if you'd had the chance to know her then. The version of her that existed in those last few years. Maybe in another life. Maybe." That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat with Desmond on our back porch. The house was quiet, peaceful. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Not reconciling with Brenna before she died?" I thought about it carefully, tested my feelings the way I always did. I regret that we ran out of time. I regret that she didn't make better choices earlier so we could have had those years. But I don't regret protecting myself. I don't regret the boundaries I set. If I'd let her back in before I was ready, if I'd sacrificed my peace for her comfort, I'd have lost myself in the process. And then what would I have had to give to Maggie? To you? To the life we've built? Nothing. Nothing. I agreed. So no, I don't regret it. I'm sad about how it ended. But I don't regret the choices I made. He kissed the top of my head. "You made the right choices." "I hope so." "You did. Look at what we have. Look at who our daughter is becoming. Look at the relationship you have with Oliver and Sophie now. None of that would exist if you hadn't set those boundaries. If you hadn't chosen yourself first." He was right. I could see it clearly. The straight line from the coffee shop confrontation to this moment. Every boundary I'd set, every person I'd walked away from, every choice I'd made to prioritize my own healing, it had all led here, to this porch, this peace, this life. 18 years after the coffee shop, I was invited to give a TED Talk about breaking generational patterns. I almost didn't accept. The spotlight still made me uncomfortable. But then I thought about all the people who'd reached out after my book, all the messages from readers saying they'd finally found the courage to leave, to protect themselves, to choose their own peace. My story mattered, not because it was unique, Unfortunately, it was far too common, but because I'd survived it and built something beautiful on the other side. The talk went viral. Millions of views. Thousands of comments from people sharing their own experiences with family dysfunction and estrangement. "You made me realize I'm not a bad person for cutting off my toxic parents," one person wrote. "You showed me that healing is more important than fixing relationships that can't be fixed," wrote another. "Thank you for giving me permission to choose myself," said a third. Permission, that's what people needed. Permission to protect themselves. Permission to walk away. Permission to prioritize their own healing over everyone else's comfort. I'd given them that, just by telling my truth. 19 years after the coffee shop, Maggie graduated high school. She'd been accepted to multiple top universities with full scholarships. She'd grown into an incredible young woman, confident, compassionate, grounded. At her graduation party, I stood back and watched her laughing with friends, talking animatedly about her plans to study social work, specifically to help children in dysfunctional families. Sophie was there too, celebrating alongside her cousin. Oliver had driven in from grad school to attend. Grant came up beside me. "Brenna would have been so proud," he said quietly. "I think so too. I never got to thank you properly for accepting the kids into your life, for giving them family when they'd lost so much. They're good kids. It wasn't hard. Still, it mattered. You mattered. To them and to Brenna, even if she never got to tell you that properly." I watched Maggie and Sophie take a selfie together, arms around each other, grinning at the camera. "We broke the cycle," I said. "You broke the cycle," Grant corrected. "You showed all of us how." 20 years after the coffee shop, I was sitting in my home office, now a grandmother myself. Maggie had married her college sweetheart and had a baby girl named Patricia, after Aunt Patricia. I was writing my second book, this one about the long-term effects of estrangement and how to navigate complicated family situations with the next generation. My phone rang. Unknown number. But I'd gotten better about answering over the years. "Hello? Hi, this is Oliver. I'm calling from the hospital. Sophie had her baby. A boy. 8 pounds, 3 ounces. Everyone's healthy." "That's wonderful news. She wants to know, would you come meet him? She's naming him Thomas, after our grandfather, but she wants you to be there. She says it's important that he knows his whole family from the beginning." Thomas. Dad's name. After everything he'd done, Sophie was still honoring him, still finding a way to acknowledge the complicated mix of good and bad that made up their family history. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. At the hospital, I held my great-nephew and looked into his tiny face. He had Brenna's eyes. My eyes. The family resemblance unmistakable. Sophie was exhausted but glowing. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me. I want him to know you. I want him to grow up understanding that family is complicated, but that doesn't mean we give up on it entirely. That sometimes we have to protect ourselves, but sometimes we get second chances with the next generation. That's a wise way to look at it. I learned it from you, and from my mom. From both of you, actually. You showed us how to walk away when we need to. She showed us how to change and grow. Between the two of you, we learned how to be whole people." I stayed at the hospital for 2 hours, holding baby Thomas, talking with Sophie and Oliver about their lives, their plans, their hopes for this new generation. When I finally left, I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried. Not from sadness, from something else. Something like resolution. I'd survived my family's dysfunction. I'd protected myself. I'd set boundaries. I'd walked away when I needed to. I'd built a life based on my values, not on obligation. And now, 20 years later, I was watching the next generation build something different, something healthier, something that honored both the pain and the healing. The cycle was broken, for good this time. I drove home to my own family. Desmond, Maggie, her husband, and baby Patricia. They were in the backyard, grilling dinner, laughing at something silly. This was my family. Not the one I'd been born into, but the one I'd built. Through choice, through boundaries, through decades of choosing myself first, so I'd have something left to give to the people who deserved it. 20 years after the coffee shop confrontation, I'd finally made peace with it all. Not forgiveness. I still didn't owe anyone that. But peace. Understanding that everyone in my original family had been doing their best, even when their best was terrible. Understanding that I'd made the right choices for me, even when those choices hurt. Understanding that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. And the second bravest thing is to let the next generation build the bridges you couldn't. I'd done both. And I was finally, completely, at peace. That evening, sitting around the dinner table with my chosen family and the beginnings of reconciliation with the next generation, I thought about Grandma's original will, the 25% she'd left me, specifically for a house of my own, security, freedom. I'd gotten that house. Not from her money, that had taken years to recover, but from my own work, my own sacrifice, my own determination. And in the end, that was better, because I'd proven to myself that I could survive without them. I could thrive without them. I could build something beautiful without their approval, their support, or their validation. I'd chosen myself. Every single day for 20 years, I'd chosen myself. And that made all the difference. As I looked around the table at faces that smiled back at me with genuine love, with respect, with acceptance, I realized something profound. I'd won. Not because I'd destroyed my original family or gotten perfect revenge, but because I'd built something better in their place. I'd taken the broken pieces they'd left me with and created a mosaic more beautiful than anything they'd ever given me. That was the real victory. Not vengeance. Not even justice. Just healing. Just peace. Just choice. Every single day, choosing the life I wanted instead of the life they'd demanded. That was enough. That was everything. My fiance's mother said the prenup was non-negotiable. So was my decision to walk away with her son. I met Damien at a bookstore 3 years ago. He was reading poetry in the philosophy section, completely lost. I showed him where the actual poetry was shelved. He asked for my number as a thank you. Our first date lasted 9 hours. His family owned a chain of luxury hotels across the eastern seaboard. The Whitmore name opened doors I didn't even know existed. Private jets, vineyard weekends, galas where champagne cost more than my monthly rent. I came from a 2-bedroom apartment where my mom worked double shifts as a dental hygienist, and my dad drove delivery trucks until his back gave out. I put myself through nursing school on scholarships and stubbornness. Damien's mother, Cordelia, tolerated me at first. She called me refreshing, authentic, a nice change from the society girls always circling her son. I thought we were building something real. Then Damien proposed with his grandmother's ring, and everything shifted. The prenup arrived by courier 3 weeks before our wedding. 47 pages of legal terms that essentially said I'd leave the marriage with exactly what I brought into it. Nothing. No matter how many years we were together, no matter how many children we had, no matter what I sacrificed for his family's empire. Cordelia scheduled a lunch to discuss it. Just us girls, she said. The restaurant had a 6-month wait list. She'd gotten us in that morning. You understand this is simply protection, she said, not looking up from her salad. For the family's interests, Damien's inheritance, his future children's security. I asked what about my security? What about the career I'd paused to raise those children? What about the years I'd give to a family that clearly saw me as a liability? She smiled, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. You'll be provided for adequately. There's a monthly allowance outlined in Section 12. An allowance. Like I was a child. Like I was the help. I told her I wouldn't sign it. Not like this. Her smile disappeared. Then there won't be a wedding. Damien understands family comes first. He always has. That night I showed Damien the document. Every clause that reduced me to a temporary guest in his life. Every provision that assumed I was only there for money. He read it slowly. Then he looked at me with those soft brown eyes I'd fallen in love with and said, "Can't you just sign it? For us?" Something cracked inside me. Not broke. Cracked. Because in that moment, I realized Damien had known. He'd known what his mother was planning. He'd known and he'd let it happen. Because keeping peace with Cordelia was easier than fighting for me. I handed back his grandmother's ring that night. He cried, begged, promised he'd talk to his mother, change the terms, make it fair. But I'd seen who he was when it mattered. A man who'd let his mother dictate the terms of his love. 3 days later, I moved back into my old apartment. My mom held me while I sobbed on her couch. My dad made me pancakes at midnight and didn't ask questions. I thought that was the end of the story. It wasn't. 6 weeks later, Damien showed up at my door. He looked different, thinner, tired. In his hands was a folder. I liquidated my trust fund, he said quietly. Transferred everything to a charity for pediatric cancer research. I'm not a Whitmore heir anymore. I'm just me. He handed me the folder. Inside was a resignation letter from his family's company, a lease for a small apartment downtown, a job offer at a nonprofit. I don't want her version of my life, he said. I want ours. I didn't take him back that night, or that month. He had to prove he meant it, that this wasn't just another performance to win me over. For 8 months, I watched him rebuild himself from nothing. He worked 60-hour weeks for a fraction of what he used to spend on dinner. He called his mother once to tell her he was done. She told him he was dead to her. Last week, Damien proposed again. No ring this time, just him, on one knee, in that same bookstore where we met. I said yes. Cordelia found out yesterday, and the voicemail she left on my phone made my blood run cold. I played it 3 times before I could process what I was hearing. You think you've won something, her voice said, cold and measured. You think you've stolen my son and that's the end of the story. But I know things about you, things that will destroy everything you've built, everything you think you deserve. I gave you a chance to walk away with dignity. You chose war instead. So be it. The message ended with a click. No goodbye, no dramatic pause, just that final surgical click. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone trembling in my hand. Damien was in the kitchen making coffee, humming something soft and off-key. He did that now, hummed. It was one of the things I'd learned about him during these 8 months of rebuilding. Rich Damien never hummed. He was too busy being perfect, being polished, being what his mother expected. This Damien, my Damien, hummed while he cooked eggs and left his socks on the bathroom floor. Babe? His voice drifted in from the kitchen. You want cream in yours? I should have told him right then. Should have walked into the kitchen, played him the voicemail, watched his face fall as his mother's venom poisoned another morning. But I didn't. I deleted the message and tucked my phone into my pocket. Just Black, I called back. I'll be out in a minute. I told myself I was protecting him, told myself he'd worked so hard to break free from her orbit, and I didn't want to drag him back in. But that was only part of the truth. The other part, the part I didn't want to examine too closely, was that I was scared. Because Cordelia didn't make empty threats. She collected ammunition. She waited. She struck when you thought you were safe. I just didn't know what ammunition she had on me. The answer came 3 days later. I was working the night shift at Metro General, the same hospital where I'd done my residency, and now worked as a registered nurse in the cardiac unit. It was 2:47 a.m. when nurse manager Rosalind pulled me aside. Rosalind was a sturdy woman in her 50s who'd seen everything the medical field could throw at a person. She'd delivered babies in elevator shafts. She'd talked down armed patients in the ER. Nothing rattled her. But that night she looked rattled. There's been a complaint, she said quietly, leading me into her office. A formal complaint filed with the nursing board. My stomach dropped. About what? She handed me a folder. Inside was a printed document, 7 pages long, detailing an accusation of medication theft, specifically controlled substances from the cardiac unit supply, opioids, fentanyl. The document included dates, times, and inventory discrepancies that allegedly corresponded with my shifts. This is insane, I said, my voice cracking. I've never stolen anything in my life. I know, Rosalind's face was grim. I've worked with you for 4 years. I know your character, but someone went to a lot of trouble to make this look legitimate. The board has to investigate. You're on administrative leave effective immediately. Who filed this? She hesitated. The complaint was anonymous, but it came with documentation, inventory logs, access records, security footage timestamps. Someone had access to systems they shouldn't have. I thought about Cordelia's network. The Whitmore family had donated over $3 million to Metro General's new cardiac wing. Their name was literally on the building where I worked, the Cordelia Whitmore Cardiac Care Center. I'd walked past that plaque every day for 2 years and never thought twice about it. Now I understood. She'd been laying the groundwork for years, even before she knew I existed, building influence, collecting favors, positioning herself to destroy anyone who crossed her. I drove home in a daze. Damien was asleep when I got there, his face peaceful in the dim light from the street. I watched him for a long moment. This man who'd given up everything for me, his inheritance, his family, his entire identity as a Whitmore heir. And now his mother was trying to take away the one thing I had that was truly mine, my career. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, going through every shift I'd worked in the past year, every patient I'd treated, every medication I'd administered. I documented everything I could remember, building my own paper trail to counter whatever Cordelia had fabricated. By morning, I had 47 pages of notes and a headache that wouldn't quit. Damien found me there, still in my scrubs, surrounded by printouts and coffee cups. "What's going on?" He sat down across from me, his face creased with concern. "Did something happen at work?" I told him everything. The voicemail, the complaint, the administrative leave. His face went through a dozen emotions: shock, anger, guilt, and finally something that looked like resignation. "I should have known," he said quietly. "I should have known she wouldn't let go. This isn't your fault." "It is." He ran his hands through his hair. A gesture I'd learned meant he was fighting back tears. "She's my mother. I know what she's capable of." I hoped that if I walked away completely, she'd have nothing left to hold over me. But she doesn't want me back. She wants to punish me, and the best way to punish me is through you. I reached across the table and took his hand. "We'll fight this." "How?" His voice cracked. "She has lawyers, resources, connections. We have nothing. We have each other." I squeezed his fingers. "And we have the truth. I never stole anything, Damien. Whatever evidence she's manufactured, it's fake. And fake evidence has holes." He looked at me with those soft brown eyes, and I saw the boy he must have been before Cordelia molded him, the boy who read poetry in wrong sections of bookstores, the boy who believed love could conquer anything. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Probably not," I said, "but you're stuck with me anyway." The investigation took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of interviews, document reviews, and waiting. 3 weeks where I couldn't work, couldn't practice the profession I'd spent years training for. My savings dwindled. My anxiety spiked. I started having nightmares about losing my license, about watching everything I'd built crumble into nothing. My parents came to visit during the second week. My mom made her famous chicken soup, the one she'd made when I was sick as a kid, and my dad fixed the leaky faucet in our bathroom that Damien had been meaning to get to for months. They didn't ask questions about the investigation. They just showed up and loved me. "That woman is a piece of work," my mom said one evening, after Damien had gone to bed. We were sitting on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker below. "But she's not smarter than my daughter. She has money, Mom. Power. She donated millions to that hospital. Money can buy a lot of things." My mom's voice was calm, certain, but it can't buy the truth. And it can't buy the people who know you, your colleagues, your patients, the people who've watched you work for years. They know who you are. She was right. During those 3 weeks, something unexpected happened. Letters started arriving at the nursing board. Not just a few, dozens. From patients I'd cared for over the years, from their families, from doctors and fellow nurses who'd worked beside me. They wrote about my compassion, my diligence, my dedication to my patients. They wrote about the time I'd held an elderly man's hand for 3 hours while he passed because his family couldn't get there in time. The time I'd noticed a medication error that could have been fatal. The time I'd worked a double shift during a blizzard because the morning staff couldn't make it in. One letter came from a woman named Beatrice, whose husband had died in my unit 2 years ago. "Nurse, my name sat with me in the chapel after Theodore passed," she wrote. She didn't have to. Her shift had ended, but she stayed for 3 more hours just so I wouldn't be alone. A woman capable of such kindness is not capable of the things she's being accused of. The investigator was a serious man named Franklin, with gray hair and tired eyes. He'd been reviewing nursing complaints for 23 years. He'd seen everything. When he called me in for my final interview, I expected the worst. Instead, he slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of the security footage that had allegedly shown me accessing the medication cabinet at suspicious times. "We had our tech team analyze these," he said. "The timestamps have been digitally altered. Someone spliced together footage from different days to create a false narrative." I stared at the documents. So the evidence was fabricated. Very professionally fabricated. He leaned back in his chair. "Someone with significant resources went to a lot of trouble to frame you. Any idea who might want to do that?" I thought about Cordelia. About her cold smile and her surgical precision. About the way she'd told me there wouldn't be a wedding if I didn't sign her prenup. "I have suspicions," I said carefully, "but no proof." Franklin nodded slowly. "The complaint has been dismissed. You'll be reinstated immediately with full back pay. Your record remains clean." He paused. "But if you ever do find proof of who did this, I'd recommend contacting the police. Filing a false complaint with a medical licensing board is a felony." I walked out of that building feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I called Damien, and when he answered, I could hear him holding his breath. "It's over," I said. "They dismissed everything." The sound he made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "I'm coming to get you. Don't move." He picked me up in his beat-up Honda Civic, the car he'd bought when he gave up the Whitmore fleet, and we drove to the bookstore where we'd first met. It had become our place, our sanctuary. We sat in the poetry section on the floor between shelves, and I told him everything Franklin had said. "She's not going to stop," Damien said quietly. "You know that, right? This was just the first attack." "I know. So what do we do?" I thought about it for a long moment. About Cordelia's resources, her connection, her willingness to destroy anything that threatened her control. Then I thought about my parents, about my mom's certainty that money couldn't buy truth, about my dad's quiet strength. "We live our lives," I said finally. "We get married, we build something real, and every time she tries to tear it down, we build it back up. Eventually, she'll run out of ammunition, or she'll realize that we're not worth the effort." Damien shook his head. "You don't know her like I do. She never runs out of ammunition. She never stops." "Then we'll never stop either." He looked at me with something like wonder. "How are you this strong?" "I'm not strong, I'm just stubborn." I leaned my head on his shoulder. "You should know that about me by now." We got married 3 months later. Not in a cathedral, not in a vineyard, not in any of the grand venues Cordelia had probably imagined for her son's wedding. We got married in my parents' backyard, under a string of lights my dad hung himself, with 43 guests who actually loved us. My mom made the cake, 3 tiers, slightly lopsided, with buttercream frosting and fresh flowers from her garden. My dad walked me down the aisle, a strip of burlap between folding chairs, and when he lifted my veil, his eyes were wet. "You take care of my girl," he said to Damien. Not a threat, a prayer. "I will, sir." Damien's voice was thick. "I promise." My best friend Jolene served as maid of honor. We'd been friends since middle school, through braces and bad boyfriends and the time she accidentally set my hair on fire at a sleepover. She'd never liked Damien at first. Too rich, too pretty, too perfect. But she'd changed her mind during those 8 months when he'd rebuilt himself. "He's real now," she told me the night before the wedding. "I can see it. The shine is gone, but what's underneath is better." Damien's best man was his former college roommate, a guy named Theodore who'd lost touch with him during the Whitmore years, but had reconnected after Damien's fall from grace. "I always knew the real Damien was in there somewhere," Theodore said in his toast. "It just took a woman brave enough to demand he show up." We didn't send Cordelia an invitation. We didn't tell her the date, but somehow she knew. The morning of the wedding, a courier arrived with a small package. Inside was a single piece of paper, typed and unsigned. "You're making a mistake. There's still time to walk away." I showed it to Damien. He read it, then tore it in half, then in quarters, then in eighths. He kept tearing until the paper was confetti in his hands. "She doesn't exist today," he said. "Today is ours." The ceremony was simple. We wrote our own vows. I promised to love him through every version of himself he became. He promised to never again choose the easy path over the right one. We exchanged rings, simple gold bands we'd picked out together at a pawn shop, and when the officiant pronounced us married, the cheer that went up from our guests was loud enough to wake the neighbors. My mom cried. My dad pretended not to cry. Jolene threw rose petals with perhaps too much enthusiasm, hitting several guests in the face. It was perfect. It was real. It was ours. That night, as we lay in my childhood bedroom, the same room where I'd sobbed over Damien 8 months earlier, I allowed myself to believe we might actually be okay. I should have known better. The first sign of trouble came 2 weeks after the wedding. Damien had been working at the nonprofit for almost a year by then. It was a small organization that helped veterans transition back to civilian life, finding them housing and job training and mental health resources. He'd started in the mailroom and worked his way up to program coordinator. He loved it. For the first time in his life, his work meant something. Then the funding dried up. It happened gradually at first. A major donor pulled out, then another, then a third. Within a month, the nonprofit had lost 60% of its operating budget. The executive director, a kind woman named Vera who'd taken a chance on a former billionaire's son, called Damien into her office. "I don't understand it," she said, showing him the list of donors who'd withdrawn. These were long-term supporters. Some of them had been giving for 20 years, and suddenly, within weeks of each other, they all just stopped. Damien looked at the names. His face went pale. "I know these people," he said quietly. "They're friends of my mother." The pieces fell into place. Cordelia hadn't just been targeting me. She'd been targeting Damien too, undermining his new life, destroying the purpose he'd found outside her shadow. The nonprofit laid off half its staff. Damien was spared, barely. But his hours were cut to 20 a week. His salary dropped to barely above minimum wage. He came home that night looking like the man who'd shown up at my door with a folder of paperwork, thin and tired and hollow. "She's going to keep doing this," he said. "Every time we build something, she's going to tear it down." I wanted to tell him he was wrong. I wanted to promise that we'd be okay, that love would be enough, that his mother would eventually get bored and move on. But I couldn't lie to him. Not anymore. "Then we need to stop reacting and start acting," I said. "We need to understand what we're dealing with." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we need to know exactly how much power she has, what resources she controls, who's in her network. We've been playing defense this whole time, but you can't win a war by only blocking punches." Damien stared at me. "You want to investigate my mother?" "I want to know what we're up against." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I know someone who might be able to help." The someone was Damien's older brother, Philip. I'd never met Philip. He existed in Damien's stories as a distant figure. The golden child who'd done everything right, inherited the company, married the appropriate socialite, produced the appropriate heirs. But according to Damien, there was more to his brother than met the eye. "Philip hates her too," Damien said as we drove to meet him. "He just hides it better. He plays the game because he has to. But underneath, he's been keeping records for years. Insurance policies, he calls them." We met Philip at a coffee shop in a part of town where no one from the Whitmore circle would be caught dead. He was taller than Damien, with with the same brown eyes, but a harder edge to his face. He looked at me with an appraising gaze, and I had the uncomfortable feeling of being weighed and measured. "So you're the one who got my brother to grow a spine," he said. "Not warm, not hostile, just factual." "I'm the one who loves your brother," I replied. The spine was already there. It just needed a reason to straighten. Something flickered across Philip's face. Surprise, maybe. Or approval. He turned to Damien. "You said you needed information about Mother's network, her influence, what she controls, and how she controls it." Philip pulled out a small USB drive and slid it across the table. "I've been compiling this for 15 years, since I realized what she really was." He paused. "Since father died." I felt Damien stiffen beside me. In all our time together, he'd rarely spoken about his father. The man had died when Damien was 12, supposedly of a heart attack. There had never been any suggestion of anything sinister. "What do you mean?" Damien asked carefully. Philip's eyes were cold. "I mean that father was planning to leave her. He'd found out about the affairs, the financial manipulations, the way she'd been skimming from the family company for years. He had divorce papers drawn up. He was going to take us and move to California. And then he had a heart attack. Philip's voice was flat. Convenient timing, wasn't it? A perfectly healthy 53-year-old man, no history of cardiac issues, drops dead 2 days before he was supposed to file for divorce. The implications hung in the air like smoke. I felt sick. "Are you saying she killed him?" Damien's voice cracked. "I'm saying I've never been able to prove she didn't." Philip stood up. "Everything I know is on that drive. Financial records, communications, a list of everyone who owes her favors and why. Use it carefully. If she finds out you have it, she'll destroy you." He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you got out, little brother. I hope you stay out." He walked away without looking back. We sat in the coffee shop for another hour, not speaking. The USB drive sat between us like a bomb waiting to go off. Finally, Damien picked it up and tucked it into his pocket. "Whatever's on here," he said quietly. "There's no going back once we look at it. I know. She's my mother. Despite everything, she's still my mother." I took his hand. "You don't have to look. We can throw the drive away right now. Forget Philip ever gave it to us. Keep living our lives and dealing with her attacks as they come." He shook his head slowly. "No, I need to know. I've spent my whole life being afraid of her, letting her control me, making excuses for her behavior. If there's something on here that explains who she really is, I need to see it." We went home. We plugged in the drive. And the truth about Cordelia Whitmore unfolded before us. The files were meticulously organized, dating back 30 years. Philip had been thorough, obsessive even. There were financial records showing hidden accounts, shell companies, money flowing in patterns that made no legitimate sense. There were emails, forwarded by sources Philip never identified, revealing affairs with business partners, threats to employees, bribes to politicians. But the worst files were about the marriages. Damien's father wasn't Cordelia's first husband. He was her third. Her first husband, a man named Elliot, had died in a boating accident 2 years into their marriage. Cordelia had inherited his family's manufacturing business. Her second husband, Gerald, had died from accidental poisoning, bad oysters at a restaurant. 3 years later, she'd inherited his real estate holdings. Then came Damien's father, Richard, the hotel empire, the heart attack that came at the most convenient possible moment. 3 husbands, I said, staring at the screen. 3 dead husbands, all with convenient timing. Damien was pale, his hands trembling. "This can't be real. Philip must be wrong. These must be coincidences." 3 coincidences? People die, accidents happen. But his voice was hollow. He didn't believe it any more than I did. I kept scrolling through the files. There was more, so much more. Cordelia had used her influence to destroy businesses that competed with her interests. She'd ruined the careers of employees who crossed her. She'd spread rumors that ended marriages, leaked information that caused suicides, manipulated markets in ways that were certainly illegal if anyone had the power to investigate. And at the center of it all, holding everything together, was a network of people who owed her. Politicians, judges, police commissioners, hospital administrators, newspaper editors. She had leverage on all of them. Secrets they didn't want exposed, favors they couldn't refuse. "She's untouchable," Damien whispered. "Even with all this evidence, who would we take it to? The police commissioner owes her. The district attorney owes her. The journalists who might expose her owe her." He was right. The scope of Cordelia's power was staggering. She'd spent decades building an empire of influence, and anyone who might challenge her was already in her pocket. But then I saw something in the files that made me pause. A name I recognized. Franklin Webb, the investigator who'd cleared me of the nursing complaint. The one who'd found the fabricated evidence. According to Philip's files, Franklin's wife had been treated for cancer at a hospital that Cordelia donated to heavily. The treatment had cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Somehow, all the bills had been mysteriously waived. Franklin owed her too, but he'd cleared me anyway. He'd looked at the evidence and done the right thing, even though it meant defying someone who had leverage over him, which meant Cordelia's network wasn't as solid as it seemed. Not everyone she owned was completely owned. Some of them might be looking for a way out. "Damien," I said slowly, "what if we're thinking about this wrong?" "What do you mean?" "We've been focused on fighting Cordelia directly, taking her head on, but she's too powerful for that. Her network is too vast." I pointed at Franklin's name on the screen. "But networks are only as strong as the people in them, and people who feel trapped, people who've been forced to do things they're ashamed of. Those people might want to be free. You want to turn her own network against her. I want to give them a choice. She's kept them in line through leverage, through fear. But if enough of them stand up at once, if there's safety in numbers..." Damien was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. It could work, but it's dangerous. If she finds out what we're doing before we're ready, I know, she'll destroy us. Not just our careers, our lives, our families, everything, I know. He looked at me with those soft brown eyes. The boy from the bookstore, the man who'd given up everything for love. Are you sure you want to do this? I thought about my mom, making soup in my kitchen because she couldn't fix anything else. I thought about my dad, fixing leaky faucets because that's how he showed love. I thought about the patients I'd cared for, the letters they'd written, the career Cordelia had tried to steal from me. I thought about every woman who'd been told to sign a prenup or else. Every person who'd been crushed under the weight of someone else's power. I'm sure, I said. And so began the dismantling of Cordelia Whitmore. It started slowly, carefully. We couldn't afford to make mistakes. The first person I approached was Franklin. We met at a diner across town, far from any Whitmore properties. He was reluctant at first, defensive. He insisted he'd cleared me because the evidence was clearly fabricated, not because of any moral awakening. I don't know what you're talking about, he said when I mentioned his wife's medical bills. I'm not accusing you of anything. I kept my voice calm. I'm thanking you. You did the right thing even though it was hard, even though there might have been pressure to do otherwise. He was silent for a long moment. Then quietly, the pressure was immense. I got calls, visits, suggestions about what the appropriate outcome should be. He looked at me with tired eyes. But I've been in this job for 23 years. I've seen what happens when people start bending the truth for powerful people. It destroys everything, including themselves. And if you had the chance to make sure she could never pressure anyone again, he studied me carefully. You're playing a dangerous game. I know. She's connected to people you can't imagine. Politicians, police, judges. I know. And you think you can take her down? I think I have to try. Franklin was quiet for a long time. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. There's a journalist at the Tribune, Miranda Lacey. She's been trying to write about the Whitmore family for years, but every time she gets close to something, her sources dry up. Advertisers threaten to pull out. Her editors get nervous. He slid the card across the table. She'd be interested in whatever you have. I took the card. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He stood up to leave. Thank me when this is over and we're both still standing. Miranda Lacey was exactly what I expected an investigative journalist to look like. Sharp eyes, sensible shoes, a perpetual coffee stain on her sleeve. We met at her cluttered office at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday, because that's when the good stories happen. Cordelia Whitmore. She said the name like it was a disease. I've been circling that woman for 15 years. Every time I think I have something solid, it evaporates. Sources recant. Documents disappear. My editor suddenly decides we have higher priorities. What if I had documentation? Real documentation. Financial records, communications, evidence of criminal activity going back decades? Her eyes lit up. Where did you get it? Does it matter? It matters for verification. I can't publish anything I can't confirm independently. I thought about Philip, about the risk he'd taken giving us that drive. I'll tell you the source if you agree to protect them. Completely. Even from me, if it comes to that. Miranda nodded slowly. I can work with that. I handed her a copy of the drive. Not the whole thing. We'd held some files back as insurance, but enough to give her a starting point. She plugged it into her computer and started scrolling. After about 10 minutes, she looked up at me with an expression I couldn't read. This is explosive, she said quietly. If even half of this is verifiable, we're talking about the biggest corruption story this city has seen in decades. Can you verify it? Give me 3 months. I gave her 3 months. During that time, Damien and I kept our heads down. He worked his reduced hours at the nonprofit. I went back to work at the hospital, now even more aware of the Cordelia Whitmore Cardiac Care Center plaque I passed every day. We lived quietly, carefully, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped in the form of an eviction notice. Our apartment building, it turned out, had been purchased by a shell company 3 weeks after our wedding. The new owners cited structural concerns and gave all residents 60 days to vacate. Structural concerns that had somehow never been mentioned in the building's 40-year history. We found a new apartment, smaller and farther from both our workplaces. A month later, that building was also purchased. Same story, different shell company. By the 4th apartment in 6 months, we stopped being surprised. We just kept moving, keep rebuilding, kept waiting. She's trying to wear us down, Damien said one night as we unpacked boxes in yet another cramped studio. Make us so tired of running that we give up. Is it working? He looked around at our meager possessions, the same boxes we'd packed and unpacked 4 times now. Then he looked at me. No, because I wake up next to you every morning, and that's worth more than any apartment. I kissed him. We made love on an air mattress because our bed frame hadn't arrived yet. It was awkward and uncomfortable and perfect. Miranda called 6 weeks later. I verified everything, she said. And I found more. A lot more. This is going to be the biggest story of my career. She paused. But I need to warn you about something. What? When this story breaks, Cordelia's going to know exactly where it came from. She's going to come after you with everything she has. I know. I'm talking about more than evictions. More than job sabotage. I'm talking about the kind of retaliation that ruins lives. That ends them. I thought about the files. The 3 dead husbands. The convenient accidents. The suspicious timing. I know. I said again. Print it anyway. The story ran on a Sunday morning, front page above the fold. Whitmore empire built on decades of corruption, manipulation, and suspicious deaths. Miranda had outdone herself. She'd verified everything on the drive and added her own research. Financial crimes, tax evasion, bribery, and the deaths, Elliot, Gerald, Richard, presented not as accusations, but as questions that demanded investigation. By noon, it was the only thing anyone was talking about. By evening, the district attorney had announced a formal investigation. By the next morning, 3 of Cordelia's political allies had publicly distanced themselves from her. The empire was cracking, but Cordelia wasn't finished yet. The call came at 2 a.m., 4 days after the story broke. Not to my phone, to my parents' phone. My mom's voice was shaking when she answered. She didn't say much, just that there had been a fire. Their house, the house where I'd grown up, the house where they'd held my wedding in the backyard 3 months ago. Damien and I drove through the night to get there. By the time we arrived, there was nothing left but smoldering wreckage and yellow caution tape. My parents were standing across the street, wrapped in shock blankets provided by paramedics. My mom was crying. My dad was just staring at the ruins, his face blank. It started in the garage, the fire marshal told us. Electrical fault, it looks like, but we're still investigating. Electrical fault. In a house where my dad had rewired the entire electrical system himself, up to code, just 5 years ago. I held my mom while she sobbed. I watched my dad's blank face slowly crumble into grief. Everything they'd owned was gone. 40 years of memories, photo albums, my mom's recipe cards handwritten by her mother, my dad's tools, collected over a lifetime. And I knew, with absolute certainty, who was responsible. She went after my family, I said to Damien later, sitting in a motel room while my parents slept in the adjoining room. Not me, not you, my family. I'm so sorry. His voice was broken. This is my fault. All of this is my fault. No. I grabbed his face, forced him to look at me. This is her fault. Cordelia's fault, not yours. You didn't burn down my parents' house. You didn't fabricate evidence against me. You didn't try to destroy our lives. She did. But if you'd never met me, then I never would have known what real love felt like, and I never would have had the courage to stand up to someone like her. I kissed him. I don't regret you, Damien. I never will. The fire changed things. Up until that point, we'd been playing defense, protecting ourselves, hoping the legal system would take care of Cordelia once the truth came out. But watching my parents lose everything, watching my mom weep over the ashes of her mother's recipes, something shifted inside me. I was done waiting. I called Franklin. I called Miranda. I called everyone on the list of people Cordelia had leverage over, everyone who might be looking for a way out. I told them about the fire. I told them what she was capable of. I told them that if we didn't stop her now, none of us would ever be safe. And one by one, they started talking. The hospital administrator who'd been pressured to falsify my records came forward first. Then a politician who'd been taking bribes for years and was tired of living in fear. Then a police detective who'd helped cover up one of Cordelia's husband's deaths and had been carrying the guilt for 2 decades. The trickle became a flood. Within a month, the district attorney had enough evidence to bring charges. Real charges. Not just financial crimes, but conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and, most damning of all, 3 counts of murder. Cordelia was arrested on a Tuesday morning. I watched it on the news, sitting in the motel room that had become our temporary home. The footage showed her being led out of her mansion in handcuffs, her face composed into an expression of dignified outrage. But I saw something else in her eyes, something I'd never seen before: fear. The trial lasted 8 months. Cordelia hired the best lawyers money could buy. She deployed every connection, every favor, every piece of leverage she'd accumulated over decades. Her defense team attacked the credibility of every witness, questioned every piece of evidence, spun elaborate alternative explanations for every damning fact. It wasn't enough. The jury deliberated for 6 days. When they returned, the forewoman's voice was steady as she read the verdicts. Guilty on 12 counts of financial fraud, guilty on 8 counts of bribery, guilty on 5 counts of obstruction of justice, and guilty on 1 count of murder in the 2nd degree, for the death of Richard Whitmore, Damien's father. The other 2 deaths couldn't be proven beyond reasonable doubt. Too much time had passed. Too much evidence had been lost or destroyed. But one was enough. One was enough to send Cordelia Whitmore to prison for the rest of her natural life. I held Damien's hand as the verdicts were read. He was crying. Not with joy, not with triumph, but with something more complicated. Grief, maybe. For the mother he'd lost twice. Once when he chose me over her empire, and again when the truth revealed who she really was. "Are you okay?" I whispered. He shook his head. "I don't know. I don't think I'll know for a long time." The sentencing came 3 weeks later. Life without parole. As the bailiffs led Cordelia away, she turned and looked directly at me. Her eyes were cold, empty, defeated, but she smiled. That same smile that never reached her eyes. "This isn't over," she mouthed, and then she was gone. We rebuilt. Not quickly, not easily, but piece by piece, day by day, we put our lives back together. My parents got an insurance settlement that covered the cost of a modest new house. Not as big as the old one, but cozy, safe. My dad built a new workshop in the garage. My mom planted a garden. Damien's nonprofit received an anonymous donation that restored their funding. He suspected Philip, but never confirmed it. He went back to full-time work, eventually becoming the executive director when Vera retired. I continued working at Metro General, though I transferred to a different unit. Walking past the Cordelia Whitmore Cardiac Care Center every day felt wrong now. The hospital eventually renamed it, a quiet acknowledgement that some names carry too much baggage. Philip and Damien reconnected, slowly, cautiously, but genuinely. Philip took over the Whitmore hotel chain and began the long process of cleaning house, firing the executives who'd enabled Cordelia, donating to charities she'd victimized, rebuilding the family name into something worth having. "You should come work for me," Philip told Damien once. "Help me fix what she broke." Damien considered it for a long moment, then shook his head. "I'm good where I am, but thank you." We bought a house eventually. A small Victorian in a quiet neighborhood, with a backyard big enough for a garden and a porch where we could sit and watch the sunset. We adopted a dog, a scruffy mutt named Biscuit, who had been abandoned at a shelter and somehow survived. He seemed appropriate. 2 years after the trial, I got pregnant. We hadn't been trying exactly, but we hadn't been preventing either. When the test came back positive, I sat in our bathroom for 20 minutes, staring at the 2 pink lines, trying to process what they meant. A child, our child. A life that would carry pieces of both of us, pieces of my stubborn working-class parents, and pieces of the Whitmore legacy, for better or worse. I thought about Cordelia's prenup, the clause about future children, the assumption that any child I bore would belong to the empire first, to me second, and I laughed, actually laughed, sitting there on the bathroom floor, because Cordelia had been so afraid that I'd use her son's children to steal from her family. And now here I was, pregnant with a Whitmore baby, and the Whitmore empire she'd built, the one she'd killed for, was being systematically dismantled by her own surviving son. She'd feared the wrong thing. She'd feared losing money, losing control, losing the legacy she'd murdered to build. She should have feared losing love, because in the end, that was what destroyed her. Not investigators or journalists or courtrooms. Love, Damien's love for me, Philip's love for his brother, even in a strange way, Richard's love for his sons. The love that had made him plan an escape all those years ago, before Cordelia silenced him forever. I told Damien about the pregnancy that evening. He cried, happy tears this time, the kind that streamed down his face while he laughed and held me and promised our child would never know the cold that had shaped his childhood. We're going to be good parents, he said. Not perfect, but good. How do you know? Because we know what bad looks like, and we've both decided to be something different. Our daughter was born on a rainy Thursday in October. She came into the world screaming, red-faced and furious, and when the nurse placed her in my arms, I understood for the first time what my parents must have felt when they held me. This is what matters. Everything else, the money, the power, the status, is just noise. This small, perfect, screaming thing is the whole point. We named her Rosalie, after my grandmother. My dad cried when we told him. My mom made a blanket covered in roses. Cordelia died in prison when Rosalie was 3 years old. Natural causes, the report said. Her heart simply gave out one night. There was a certain poetry to that. The heart she'd hardened over decades finally failing her. Damien attended the funeral. I offered to go with him, but he said he needed to do it alone. He was gone for 2 days. When he came back, his eyes were red, but his shoulders were lighter. Did you forgive her? I asked. He thought about it for a long time. I don't know if I'll ever forgive her, but I think I finally understand her. She was afraid. Her whole life she was terrified. Of being powerless, of being abandoned, of losing control. And that fear made her into a monster. He paused. I was afraid too, for a long time. Afraid of losing her approval. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid of what she'd do if I stepped out of line. And that fear almost made me into a monster too. The version of me who asked you to just sign the prenup, that was her monster. Her creation. But you chose differently. Because you showed me another way. He took my hand. You showed me that love doesn't have to be earned through obedience. That family doesn't have to mean control. That being brave isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to do the right thing anyway. Rosalie toddled into the room at that moment, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. She climbed into Damien's lap and demanded a story. He obliged, his voice shifting into the animated tones of a practiced father, and I watched them together. My husband and my daughter, the family I'd fought for, and I felt something settle in my chest. Peace. After everything, finally, peace. There's more to the story, of course. There always is. Philip married a woman named Genevieve who challenged him in all the right ways. They had twins, and suddenly Rosalie had cousins to play with at holiday gatherings. My parents grew older but stayed active, babysitting Rosalie every weekend so Damien and I could have date nights. Biscuit lived to the ripe old age of 14 before passing quietly in his sleep, and we buried him in the backyard with full honors. My career flourished. I eventually became head nurse of my unit, then transitioned into nursing education, training the next generation. I told my students about the importance of documentation, of integrity, of doing the right thing even when powerful people pressure you to do otherwise. I never told them the whole story. That felt too personal, but I hoped the lesson came through anyway. Damien became a respected figure in the nonprofit world. He spoke at conferences about the importance of second chances, about breaking free from toxic family systems, about building purpose outside of inherited wealth. People who knew his history were sometimes skeptical, but those who worked with him saw the change was real. And Rosalie grew. She had Damien's soft brown eyes and my stubborn streak. She loved books, reading them, writing them, building towers out of them when she was feeling mischievous. She asked endless questions about everything and had no patience for answers that didn't make sense. When she was 7, she found an old photo of Cordelia in a box we'd never gotten around to throwing away. "Who's this?" she asked, studying the image of the elegant woman with the cold smile. Damien and I looked at each other. We'd known this conversation was coming. We'd talked about how to handle it. "That's your grandmother," Damien said carefully. "My mother. Where is she?" "She's not alive anymore." Rosalie considered this. "Did she make you sad?" Damien was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes. She made a lot of people sad. She didn't know how to love without hurting." "That's silly," Rosalie said matter-of-factly. "Love isn't supposed to hurt." I pulled her into my lap. "You're exactly right, sweetheart. Love isn't supposed to hurt." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her book. But later that night, she crawled into our bed, something she rarely did anymore, and curled up between. "I love you," she whispered, "and it doesn't hurt at all." I held my daughter. I held my husband's hand across her small body. And I thought about the journey that had brought us here, the prenup that started it all, the crack that formed when Damien asked me to just sign it, the months of rebuilding, the fire, the fear, the fight. Cordelia's empire, crumbling under the weight of its own corruption. And I realized that Cordelia had been right about one thing. The day she told me there wouldn't be a wedding if I didn't sign the prenup. She'd been right that I was making a choice. She just hadn't understood what the choice really was. It wasn't about money or inheritance or protecting the family interests. It was about deciding who I wanted to be, what kind of love I was willing to accept, what I was willing to fight for. She thought she was offering me a test. Sign the document, prove your loyalty, become one of us. But the real test was different. The real test was whether I would stand up for myself, even when it cost me everything. Whether I would choose integrity over comfort, love over security, truth over acceptance. I passed that test. And so did Damien. And every day since then, we've kept passing it. Every time we choose honesty over convenience, every time we admit when we're wrong, every time we put our daughter's well-being above our own desires, every time we remember that love is a verb, not a transaction, Cordelia built her empire on control, on fear, on the assumption that everyone could be bought, everyone could be leveraged, everyone had a price. We built ours on something different, on trust, on vulnerability, on the radical belief that you can build a life with someone without needing an insurance policy against their betrayal. And you know what? Our way is better. I still have the voicemail somewhere. The one Cordelia left the day after she found out Damien proposed again. The one that made my blood run cold. I never deleted it. I don't know why. Maybe I keep it as a reminder of how far we've come. Maybe I keep it as evidence of who she was, in case I ever start to doubt my memory. Maybe I keep it because some part of me needs proof that we survived something. I listened to it recently, for the first time in years. Rosalie was at school, Damien was at work, and I was alone in our house. The house we'd built, the life we'd created. And I pressed play. You think you've won something. You think you've stolen my son, and that's the end of the story. But I know things about you. Things that will destroy everything you've built. Everything you think you deserve. I gave you a chance to walk away with dignity. You chose war instead. So be it. Her voice was cold, controlled, absolutely certain of her own power. She was wrong about everything. I hadn't stolen her son. He'd chosen me, chosen us, chosen a life where love meant more than leverage. She didn't know things about me. She manufactured them, fabricated evidence, manipulated systems. And when the truth came out, her fabrications crumbled like the empire she'd built them to protect. The war she'd declared didn't end the way she expected. It ended with her in prison and us in this house, with our daughter and our dog and our quiet, beautiful, ordinary life. I deleted the voicemail, finally, after all these years. And then I went to pick up Rosalie from school. She came running out the doors, backpack bouncing, face lit up with whatever adventure the day had brought. She grabbed my hand and started talking about her friend Marguerite, about the book they were reading in class, about the caterpillar she'd found on the playground. I listened to every word. I memorized the way her hand felt in mine. I thanked whatever force in the universe had led me to that bookstore 3 years before my life changed, had led me to the poetry section where a lost man was reading philosophy, had set in motion the chain of events that brought me here. Damien once asked me how I could be so strong. The answer is that I'm not strong. I'm just stubborn. I'm just a girl from a 2-bedroom apartment who put herself through nursing school on scholarships and stubbornness, who fell in love with a rich boy who fell in love with her back, who refused to be diminished by someone else's prenup. I didn't win because I was stronger than Cordelia. I won because I was willing to lose, willing to walk away from the ring, the wedding, the life of luxury, willing to let Damien prove himself over 8 long months, willing to rebuild 4 times when she kept knocking us down. She couldn't beat me because I had nothing she could take. My value wasn't in my bank account or my social standing or my connections. It was in my integrity, my stubbornness, my love, and those things can't be taken. They can only be given away. I never gave them away. Neither did Damien. Neither will our daughter. That's the legacy we're building. Not money, not power. Not an empire of hotels and shell companies and leveraged favors, just a family that loves each other, just a life that matters. It's enough, more than enough. It's everything. Sometimes, late at night, when Damien is asleep and the house is quiet, I walk through the rooms of our home, past Rosalie's bedroom, where she sleeps surrounded by books, past the kitchen, where Damien's coffee cup sits in the sink from the morning, past the living room, where Biscuit's old bed still sits in the corner because we can't quite bring ourselves to move it. And I think about the woman I was before all this. The woman who worked double shifts and lived in a cramped apartment and thought love stories were for other people, richer people, luckier people, people who didn't have to fight for every inch of ground. I think about the woman I became, a fighter, a survivor, a wife and mother and nurse and friend, someone who learned that the best things in life aren't the things that come easy. They're the things you have to build, brick by brick, from the rubble of whatever tried to destroy you. And I think about the woman I'm still becoming, because the story isn't over. Stories never really end. They just continue in different forms, different chapters, different hands. Rosalie will have her own battles to fight, her own Cordelias to face. I can't protect her from that, but I can show her how to stand, how to refuse what diminishes her, how to love without losing herself. That's what parents do, I think. We don't give our children perfect lives. We give them the tools to build their own. We show them by example what it looks like to fall down and get back up, what it looks like to choose love over fear, what it looks like to say no to a 47-page prenup and yes to a life of uncertainty and struggle and joy, what it looks like to be brave. My mom calls me every Sunday. We talk about nothing important, recipes, weather, whatever show she's watching, but underneath the small talk is something bigger. A lifetime of love expressed in the only language my family knows. Showing up, holding on, being there. My dad is teaching Rosalie to use tools. He started her on a hammer and nails when she was 5, and now at 7, she's building birdhouses. Crooked, imperfect birdhouses that fall apart in strong wind. But she made them herself, and that's what matters. Damien is writing a memoir. He doesn't talk about it much, but sometimes I catch him at his desk late at night, typing slowly, looking at the screen with an expression I can't quite read. I don't ask what it says. When he's ready, he'll share it. That's how we work now, not demanding access to each other's inner lives, but trusting that the doors will open when the time is right. We're not perfect. We fight about stupid things, dishes, schedules, whether Rosalie should have a phone. We go to therapy not because we're broken, but because we know how easy it would be to become broken. We've seen it. We've lived it. We're committed to being different, and we are different. Not in spite of Cordelia, because of her. She was the fire that forged us, the pressure that revealed what we were made of, the test we didn't know we were taking until we'd already passed. I hate her for what she did. I'll always hate her for the fire, for the fabricated charges, for the years of harassment, for the 3 men she probably murdered. But I also understand, in a strange way, that she made me who I am, that without her cruelty, I never would have discovered my own strength. It's complicated. Most true things are. Damien feels it too. He loved his mother, in the way children always love their parents, even when those parents are monsters. He grieves her still, not the real Cordelia, but the mother she might have been if fear hadn't twisted her into something unrecognizable. He grieves the relationship they never had, the conversations they never will, but he doesn't let that grief define him. He carries it, acknowledges it, makes space for it. And then he goes to work, kisses his daughter, holds his wife, lives his life. That's healing. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of meaning despite the pain. We have meaning. So much meaning. In our marriage, our family, our work, our small, beautiful, ordinary life. Cordelia had money, power, control, an empire that spanned the eastern seaboard. We have each other. We win. The last time I visited my parents' new house, my mom showed me something she'd found in a box they'd been storing at my aunt's place, one of the few boxes that survived the fire. It was a photo from their wedding. My mom in a simple white dress, my dad in a suit that didn't quite fit. They were standing in front of a tiny church, squinting into the sun, grinning like idiots. We had $40 between us, my mom said. We drove to Vegas because we couldn't afford a real wedding. We ate at a diner on the way back and split a plate of pancakes. Were you scared? She laughed, terrified. I had no idea if we'd make it, if we could build a life together, if love was enough. She looked at the photo with soft eyes. But we tried anyway, and here we are, 52 years later. I thought about my own wedding, the backyard ceremony, the homemade cake, the 43 guests who actually loved us. Not so different from a Vegas chapel and split pancakes. How did you know? I asked. How did you know it was worth the risk? My mom looked at me with the expression she always got when she was about to say something important. I didn't know. That's the whole point. You don't get to know in advance. You just have to decide what you believe in and then bet everything on it. She squeezed my hand. You did good, baby girl. You bet on the right thing. I drove home that evening, through streets I'd known my whole life, past landmarks of my childhood, the elementary school, the library, the park where I'd had my first kiss with a boy whose name I can't remember. I thought about the girl I'd been, growing up in that 2-bedroom apartment, dreaming of something more. I'd wanted adventure, romance, a life bigger than what I'd known. I got all of that, just not in the way I'd imagined. The adventure wasn't glamorous. It was terrifying. It was fighting to keep my nursing license. It was watching my parents' house burn. It was being evicted 4 times in 6 months. It was wondering some nights if we'd made a terrible mistake. The romance wasn't a fairy tale. It was hard work. It was therapy and difficult conversations and learning to fight fair. It was watching Damien cry at his mother's funeral and not knowing how to help. It was being imperfect, together, for the rest of our lives. And the life I dreamed of, the bigger-than-ordinary life, wasn't about money or status or power. It was about love, real love, the kind that doesn't come with conditions or clauses, the kind that survives fire and fraud and decades of poison. Cordelia's prenup had 47 pages of terms. Ours had none. I pulled into our driveway as the sun was setting. Damien's car was already there. Through the window, I could see Rosalie jumping on the couch while Damien pretended to chase her. They were both laughing. I sat in the car for a moment, just watching, just breathing, just being grateful. Then I went inside to join my family, because in the end, that's what it all comes down to. Not the battles you win or the enemies you defeat. Not the empires you build or the legacies you leave. Just the people you love, and the choice to keep loving them, every single day. I chose Damien. He chose me. We chose each other, over and over, through every obstacle Cordelia threw at us. And we'll keep choosing, for as long as we have. That's the real victory. The one no prenup can protect against, no fire can destroy, no empire can outlast. Love, freely given. Love, stubbornly held. Love, the non-negotiable that saved us both. 15 years later, Rosalie came home from college for Thanksgiving with a boy she wanted us to meet. His name was Isaiah. He was tall and nervous and clearly terrified of us, which I found endearing. He helped my dad fix the garbage disposal without being asked. He complimented my mom's sweet potatoes 3 separate times. He looked at Rosalie like she'd hung the moon. I like him, Damien said quietly as we watched them through the kitchen window. They were in the backyard, walking through my mom's garden, their heads close together. Because he fixed the garbage disposal? Because he looks at her the way I look at you. I smiled and leaned into his shoulder. His hair was graying now, distinguished silver at his temples. Mine too, though I pretended not to notice. We were older, slower, more tired than we used to be, but we were still us. That evening after dinner, Rosalie found me alone in the kitchen. She was 20 now, confident in ways I hadn't been at her age, but I could see the uncertainty flickering beneath her surface. "Mom," she said carefully, "Isaiah wants to ask you and Dad something." My heart clenched. I knew what was coming. I'd known the moment I saw them together. Isaiah asked for our blessing to propose. Damien gave it, tears streaming down his face. I gave it too after making Isaiah promise, truly promise, that he understood what marriage meant. That he understood it wasn't about ownership or control or financial security. That it was about choosing someone, every single day even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. "I understand," he said. His eyes were steady. His voice was sheer. He reminded me in that moment of Damien, not the polished heir I'd first met, but the man who'd shown up at my door with a folder full of proof that he was willing to give up everything. The man who'd rebuilt himself from nothing. The man who'd chosen love over legacy. They got married the following spring. It was a bigger wedding than ours. Rosalie wanted a venue, a photographer, a proper band, but it was still recognizably theirs. Personal, meaningful, full of people who actually loved them. Damien gave a toast. He talked about what marriage had taught him, about fear and courage, about choosing to be brave every single day. "My mother once tried to dictate the terms of my love," he said. "She handed me a 47-page prenup and expected me to accept it without question. I almost did. I almost lost everything that mattered because I was afraid to stand up for what I believed in." He looked at Rosalie, his eyes wet. "But your mother taught me something. She taught me that love isn't a contract. It can't be negotiated. It can't be protected against. It can only be given, freely, completely, without conditions." He raised his glass. "To Rosalie and Isaiah, may your love be as stubborn as your grandmother's, as brave as your mother's, as real as everything we've built together." I cried. Everyone cried. And then we danced. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the venue had emptied, I stood alone on the balcony, looking out at the stars. Rosalie and Isaiah had left for their honeymoon. Damien was inside, saying goodbye to Philip and Genevieve. My parents had gone home hours ago, tired but happy. I thought about Cordelia, about the war she'd declared all those years ago, about the empire she'd tried to protect, the legacy she'd tried to preserve, the control she'd tried to maintain. She'd lost everything, her money, her power, her freedom, her life. I'd gained everything. A husband who loved me, a daughter who was becoming an incredible woman, parents who'd shown me what family really meant, a career that mattered, a life that was full. And standing there, under those stars, I finally understood something I'd been circling for years. Cordelia's prenup wasn't about money. Not really. It was about fear. She was terrified of losing control, of being betrayed, of loving someone and having it cost her something. So she built walls, drafted documents, created systems of control that promised to protect her from the vulnerability of real connection. But walls don't protect you from loneliness. Documents don't save you from yourself. Control is an illusion that shatters the moment someone refuses to play your game. I'd refused to play. And in refusing, I'd freed us both, Damien and me. We'd built something real, something that didn't need protecting because it wasn't built on fear. Cordelia died alone in a prison cell, surrounded by guards who didn't care about her, mourned by sons who'd spent their lives trying to escape her shadow. I would die, someday, hopefully many years from now, surrounded by the people I loved, by the family I'd built, by the legacy that mattered. Not money, not power, not an empire of hotels and shell companies, just love, stubborn, brave, unconditional love, the non-negotiable that changed everything. Damien joined me on the balcony, his hand finding mine in the darkness. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Your mother." He was quiet for a moment, then, "Do you still hate her?" I considered the question, really considered it. "No," I said finally. "I don't hate her anymore. I feel sorry for her. She was so afraid of being hurt that she never let herself be loved, and that's the saddest thing I can imagine." He squeezed my hand. "Thank you. For what? For being brave enough to refuse her, for being patient enough to let me figure out who I wanted to be, for loving me even when I didn't deserve it." He turned to face me, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "For giving me this life." I kissed him, slowly, tenderly, the same way I'd kissed him that first night, after our 9-hour date, the same way I'd kiss him until the end. "You gave me this life too," I said. We built it together. We stood there for a while longer, watching the stars, holding hands, being quiet, being married, being us. Eventually we went home, to our house, to our life, and we lived happily ever after. Not because everything was perfect, not because we never fought or struggled or faced challenges, but because we chose each other. Every single day. Through everything. That's what happily ever after really means. It means choosing. It means staying. It means love. The non-negotiable kind. The only kind worth having.